Chapter 280. One-on-one? You must be joking. When have you ever seen a tiger cutting off its claws to duel with another? From within the palace walls, the voice of the victor sounded. Huang Chang, sell it to me for 70,000 gold taels. Don't even think about it. Huang Chang, this woozy steel sword only costs 55,000 gold taels. Even if I offer 70,000 gold taels, you can still earn 15,000 gold taels. At the very most, you can just buy another one. Zhou Ji, since you're so capable, you can just buy one yourself. Why are you giving me the money to earn? Do you take me for a fool? It wasn't easy for the Zhang clan to release the stock for several months, but they only managed to produce 30 woozy steel swords. With so many people in the Imperial Army, it's impossible for them to meet the demand. Right now, they are selling for 80,000 gold taels each, and there's no market for them. If Wang Gongzi were to pay for it himself, it would be even more expensive. Upon hearing those words, Li Qingyu finally decided to stop hiding and walked into the palace. What were you all talking about? Placing his hands behind his back, Li Qingyu held onto the sword tip and walked in slowly. Lord Li. On the training field, the 3 Imperial Army members were shocked to see Li Qingyu. They hurriedly lowered their heads. In the capital, there wasn't a single Imperial Army member who didn't recognize the military affairs officer, Li Qingyu. This was their true superior. All of the equipment, armor, stipend, and weapons of the 100,000 Imperial Army members had to pass through Li Qingyu's hands. Unlike them, he could enter the royal palace to meet the emperor at any time. If they were to offend him, not even the Grand Marshal would be able to reason with them if they were to deduct their equipment. There were many people in the royal palace, and the trio didn't expect to meet this person. One must know that this person rarely interacted with them. Lord, we were only sparring with one another. We didn't do anything. Faced with Li Qingyu's questioning, the trio felt uneasy. That's not what I'm asking. Can I take a look at that sword? Li Qingyu pointed to the sword in the hands of one of the Imperial Army members. This, of course. The Imperial Guard named Huang Chang agreed verbally, but his expression was one of extreme reluctance, as if his flesh was being cut off. He reluctantly handed over the woozy steel sword. Li Qingyu turned a blind eye to it and held the woozy steel sword in his hand. He first weighed it in his hand and then touched it. It's very heavy. Its actual weight was several times heavier than it looked. The surface is very smooth, but it's not just smooth. There are grooves on the blade, which should be designed to increase its lethality. Li Qingyu thought to himself. Once experts exchanged blows, one would know whether there was a real expert or not. Li Qing had dealt with weapons and armaments all his life. He had dealt with hundreds of thousands of weapons, so he was very familiar with the performance of weapons. There were many weapons that didn't even need to be tested. One could almost judge the quality of the weapon just by touching it, and it could even reach an extremely fine level. This meter-long sword was heavy and cold to the touch, as if touching a block of ice. The forging technique of this weapon was clearly different from that of ordinary weapons. At the very least, the weapons forged by the workshops of the royal court and the few clans in the capital weren't of this nature. This is a woozy steel weapon? Li Qingyu weighed the sword in his hand in bewilderment. The youngest son of the Wang clan, Wang Chong, had forged an incomparably sharp and indestructible sword at the Blue Bottle Pavilion. Be it the sabers and swords of the Abbasid Caliphate, Karak's Spazanu, or the famed sabers and swords of the Central Plains, none of them were a match for the woozy steel weapon. This legend had been spreading like wildfire in the capital 4 to 5 months ago. Naturally, Li Qingyu had heard of it as well. However, different from others, Li Qingyu had always scoffed at such rumors. He had never believed them. How could the birth of a new weapon be that simple? There was a saying that there were talents in martial arts. Some people were born smarter than others, possessing superior intelligence, superior cultivation speed, and a unique constitution. However, could it be possible for one to be born with a new forging technique? Which of the weapons that were still in existence hadn't been passed down for centuries, or even millennia? They had been perfected generation after generation. How could a brand new forging technique suddenly appear out of nowhere? Furthermore, It was able to slice through other famed swords as though they were tofu. Thus, Li Qingyu had never believed it. On top of that, the Wuzi steel weapon was extremely rare. Most people had only heard of it from legends, and only a few had seen it with their own eyes. Thus, Li Qingyu had never believed it. However, at this moment, Li Qingyu wasn't so certain. Clang. Before the trio could react, Li Qingyu's sword had already swept across the broken sword in the hands of one of the Imperial Army members. An inaudible sound echoed, and the broken sword in the hands of the Imperial Army member snapped once more. The tip of the sword fell to the ground and pierced into the tiles. The trio was taken aback for a moment, but they soon recovered from their shock. Just based on the price of the Wuzi steel sword alone, it would be a miracle if the swords of the various clans in the capital could compare to it. However, Li Qingyu's perception was different. He couldn't sense the existence of the Lu clan's weapons at all. It was as though the sword had sliced through the air. This was the first time Li Qingyu had come into contact with such a weapon, and it was also the first time he experienced the sharpness of the Wuzi steel sword. Even with Li Qingyu's long experience, he had never come across such a fearsome weapon before. The sharpness of this weapon was unimaginable. "Take off your armor." A thought flashed across Li Qingyu's mind, and he suddenly pointed to the armor on one of the Imperial Army members. The latter was perplexed. "Yes, Lord." Even though the Imperial Army member was perplexed, he still obediently took off his armor. The military minister was in charge of the Imperial Army armory, so he had plenty of such armors. Qi La, with a wave of his hand, the heavy armor was silently sliced into two. Clang. It fell to the ground, and the cut was as smooth as a mirror. Even though Huang Chang and the other Imperial Army members were mentally prepared, they were still shocked by Li Qingyu's actions. However, it wasn't just the Imperial Army members who were shocked. Even Li Qingyu himself was shocked. SSSSS. To think that it's real. Upon seeing the Wuzi steel, the first thing that came to Li Qingyu's mind was the Blue Bottle Pavilion. It was said that this sword could cleave a metal mountain into two with a single slash. Those like Li Qingyu who weren't present at the scene would usually laugh it off, thinking that it was just a rumor. However, seeing was believing. Looking at the Imperial Army member's armor that was sliced into two, Li Qingyu was astounded. He didn't have the slightest bit of doubt in his heart. On the battlefield, regardless of whether it was his ally or foe, they would always use the best armor. Some of the elite heavy-armored cavalrymen wore armor forged from deep-sea Xian metal. Most of these armors were incomparably tough, and it would require 3, 4, or even more than 10 slashes to leave a mark on it. Otherwise, it would require a powerful external force to strike it. There was a limit to the parts that could be struck. There were very few armors like the Wuzi steel, which could be easily sliced apart. Li Qingyu had been in charge of the Imperial Army's weapons for more than a decade, so he was extremely sensitive to the value of weapons. Just like Zhao Fengchen, Li Qingyu immediately realized the might and value of this weapon once it was mass-produced. "What did you say? This weapon costs 80,000 gold taels each? Isn't that a little too expensive?" Li Qingyu stared at the trio with a deep frown on his forehead. Even if he searched through all of the sword shops in the capital, there wasn't a single sword that was as expensive as this one. "Hee, Lord Li, don't think that it's too expensive. In the royal palace, there are many Imperial Army brothers who couldn't buy it even if they wanted to. Naturally, a good weapon isn't cheap." Upon hearing Li Qingyu's words, the Imperial Army member named Huang Chang relaxed. As long as the other party wasn't picking on them, everything else was fine. Besides, don't underestimate it. Just because it costs more than 10,000 gold taels each, it's already considered cheap. Think about it, how many people are there in the Imperial Army? There are at least 100,000 of them. However, there are only 40 to 50 swords in total, and this is the production of 4 to 5 months. There aren't enough monks and gruel. How can it possibly be enough? Furthermore, this price is the price of the Zhang clan. It wasn't forged by Wang Gongzi personally. If it was forged by Wang Gongzi personally, it would be worth far more than this. Privately, it has already exceeded 100,000 gold taels. The Imperial Army member named Huang Chang spoke gleefully. Clearly, he was proud of the fact that he had bought a Wuzi steel sword. Are there two other sellers of this Wuzi steel sword? Li Qingyu asked with a frown. Of course not. This is forged by Wang Gongzi and the capital's Zhang clan together. Otherwise, given Wang Gongzi's personality, wouldn't he only make 1 or 2 a month? Sometimes, he might not even make a single one at all. This time, it was another Imperial Army member who agreed with Huang Cheng. However, even though it's from the capital's Zhang clan, I heard that it's Wang Gongzi who guards the final few stages of the forging. Thus, there shouldn't be a problem with the quality. The third Imperial Army member said. Everyone in the capital knew that the production rate of Wuzi steel weapons wasn't high. If it was just Wang Cheng's capability, most of the Imperial Army members wouldn't be able to get their hands on such a powerful weapon. This was the reason why the capital's Zhang clan existed. No one minded the existence of the capital's Zhang clan at all. On the contrary, they were more than happy to see it happen. They couldn't wait for more of such weapons to appear. However, if it's Wang Gongzi who's the one, the price won't be this low. 200,000 gold taels. That was the price a few months ago. The commander bought one and treated it as a treasure. Everyone says that Wang Gongzi's weapon is priceless, and its true value probably exceeds 200,000 gold taels. In the Imperial Army, probably only the commander and the others are able to afford it. The trio couldn't conceal the envy in their eyes. Everyone knew that Wang Gongzi's weapons were unique. Every single one of them had a unique design, and lethality. Those weapons weren't just weapons, they were also exquisite works of art. Following which, Li Qingyu asked many more questions. It was as though he had discovered a brand new world. For the first time, he realized that there was a small market for Wuzi steel within the Imperial Army. For the first time, he realized that the legends of the Blue Bottle Pavilion were all true. Slowly, some ideas began to form in Li Qingyu's mind. He suddenly knew how he should report to the Holy Emperor during the inspection today. I'll be taking this Wuzi steel sword with me. Come and get it from me 7 days later. With the Wuzi steel sword in hand, Li Qingyu hurriedly headed to the Taiji Palace where the Holy Emperor resided. Thinking of the brilliant idea in his mind, Li Qingyu couldn't help but feel his blood boiling. Chapter 281. Translated by Hypersheep 325. Zhang Shouji moved swiftly. After receiving Wang Cheng's support and the prescription, Zhang Shouji left the shabby alley he lived in 2 days later. He gathered a large group of workers, craftsmen, and engineers from the capital and set off for the Great Tang's southwest without a moment's rest. Leaving together with them were Wang Cheng's several 100,000 gold taels and a large group of guards from the Wang clan. Zhangqiu Jianqiong and Xinyu Zhongtong had already informed them of this matter, so there should be someone to receive them when they arrived. After settling this matter for the time being, Wang Cheng turned his attention back to his cultivation. In the elegant and tranquil study room, there was a table and a chair, simple and unadorned. At this very moment, Wang Cheng was seated cross-legged on the floor, cultivating silently. A powerful aura slowly emanated from his body. Compared to a few days ago, it was clear that it was much stronger. Even though he had just reached Origin Energy Tier 9 Pinnacle, Wang Cheng's aura wasn't as simple as it seemed. The aura he exuded didn't feel like that of an Origin Energy Realm cultivator, but that of a true martial realm expert. At this very moment, Wang Cheng focused all of his attention on the Guanyuan, Beikei, Fengping, and Luanli acupoints in his body. In a dimension invisible to the naked eye, surges of origin energy flowed through Wang Cheng's body. Then, as though an ocean gushing into a small canal, they flowed into the miniature circulation within these acupoints. True Martial Little Dipper. This was the name of this miniature circulation that only a few people knew of. Under normal circumstances, it would take 1 to 2 years to advance from Origin Energy Tier 9 to true martial realm. Even the most talented martial arts genius would require at least half a year. But of course, it was rare for someone like his little sister to possess innate divine strength, with the exception of 8 characters of Yin. True Martial Little Dipper was such a technique. It was used in the later generations to help Origin Energy Realm cultivators reach true martial realm as quickly as possible. Even in the future, not many people knew about this technique. As for now, other than Wang Chong, no one else knew. The true martial realm was different from the origin energy realm. The biggest difference was that almost all true martial realm martial artists could release their internal qi, and it was no longer limited to their bodies. But when Yuan qi was used in actual combat, the nature was completely different. It became even more ferocious and destructive. This kind of origin qi was called stellar energy. When a true martial realm expert made a move, the martial halos that burst out of their bodies were almost all gang qis. The nature of this thing was different from Wang Chong's vital energy. What Wang Chong was doing now was making use of the true martial Little Dipper's tiny circulation to compress the Yuan qi in his body and change its nature, making it even more powerful. Then, he would use the astral energy to transform his body and make himself stronger. In other words, the true martial Little Dipper could allow Wang Chong to possess true martial level stellar energy at the essence energy realm. It was just that the amount was not as great. This was the advantage of this technique. Congratulations to user for successfully developing an elementary quality rice. You are rewarded with 50 destiny energy. Just as Wang Chong was silently cultivating, a familiar voice suddenly sounded in his head. At the same time, something seemed to have surged into his head, and Wang Chong immediately felt that something was amiss. Wang Chong exclaimed in surprise. He slowly opened his eyes, and a sharp glint reminiscent of the stars in the night sky flashed across his eyes. What's going on? Isn't 50 destiny energy a little too much? Wang Chong was bewildered. He was originally in the middle of cultivating, and this sudden turn of events was really unexpected. Zhang Munian's side has produced results so quickly? In an instant, countless thoughts flashed across Wang Chong's head. Needless to say, Wang Chong knew that this must be Zhang Munian's doing. Thinking about it, it had only been 4 to 5 months since he arrived at Jiaoji, and yet, he had already managed to develop an elementary quality rice. This was truly inconceivable. One must know that in the other world, this step would have taken 4 to 5 years. Could it be due to the climate of Jiaoji? Wang Chong fell into deep thought. To the people of the Tang dynasty, Jiaoji was far from the royal court, and it was definitely a remote and desolate place. However, there was no better place than Jiaoji for the selection of good crops. There was ample sunlight, and the climate was mild. Crops could be grown 3 times a year. Compared to other places where rice could only be grown once a year, Jiaoji was clearly a paradise. Furthermore, with Wang Chong's guidance, Zhang Munian had indeed avoided many detours. Even so, 4 to 5 months still left Wang Chong surprised. That fellow sure is hardworking. Suddenly understanding something, Wang Chong inwardly sighed. He heard that Zhang Munian had been eating and sleeping outside ever since he arrived at Jiaoji. He didn't return to the residence that was arranged for him at all. The only reason why he was able to produce such results so quickly was due to his hard work. There's no mention of hybrid rice. It only says that it's elementary superior rice, so it's likely that he hasn't succeeded yet. Just that, I wonder how much he managed to raise the yield of the rice. Wang Chong pondered. This world was filled with powerful martial arts, and the top-notch martial artists possessed strength comparable to gods. However, it was a pity that no matter how formidable a martial artist was, he couldn't make a move on a place like rice. Thus, even though the world was prosperous and peaceful, the yield of rice wasn't high. It wasn't at the level of 1,000 caddies per mu, 2 to 3,000 caddies, or even 3 to 4,000 caddies per mu. Without sufficient rations, the population wasn't as large. The entire Tang dynasty only had a population of 50 million or so. It wasn't at the scale of 100 million like in the future. This was also the reason why Wang Chong sought out Zhang Munian to change this situation. Without a large population and rations, it was impossible for them to succeed in the future battlefield. But isn't this reward a little too generous? It's only elementary superior rice, far from hybrid rice. Yet, it's already rewarded with 50 destiny energy. This is truly inconceivable. Compared to Zhang Munian's speed, what shocked Wang Chong the most at this moment was the content of the voice in his head. 50 destiny energy. Wasn't this reward way too generous? Wang Chong clearly remembered that the rewards for changing the fate of his clan and the regional commander's incident weren't this generous. Could it be that Zhang Munian's rice was more important than the regional commander's incident and the survival of the Wang clan? A bizarre expression appeared on Wang Chong's face. There was an indescribable feeling in his heart. He had taken a huge risk in the matter regarding Yao Guangyi and the regional commander's incident, but the reward he received was even less than Zhang Munian's elementary research in Jiaoji. It was truly an indescribable feeling. I understand now. After a moment of contemplation, Wang Chong soon came to a realization. So, it's still because of the influence of the incident, right? The matter at the vast crane pavilion only affected the Wang clan. Compared to the world, it didn't mean much at all. On the other hand, the regional commander's incident had a much greater influence, and it attracted the attention of the royal court. Thus, the reward was slightly greater. If I had completed it perfectly back then, the reward wouldn't have been any lesser than this. As for Zhang Munian's elementary superior rice, food is the first priority of the people, and this is an incident that will influence the world for generations to come. There's nothing that could be more influential than this. If not for Zhang Munian's recent breakthrough, the reward would have been far more than this. Upon understanding this point, Wang Chong couldn't help but feel delighted. The 50 destiny energy was an unexpected gain. More importantly, Zhang Munian was still far from creating a true hybrid rice. In other words, he would be able to obtain an endless supply of destiny energy from this incident. This was an unexpected gain. Up till now, this was the easiest and largest reward that Wang Chong had received. From the consort Taijin incident and the regional commander's incident, Wang Chong had received a total of 50 destiny energy. After deducting the destiny energy from the second world constraint, he was left with 15 points. Not too long ago, he had encircled the Gogurians and killed 3 Gogurian generals. Including King Sojirim, he had received 25 destiny energy. Adding the 50 destiny energy that he had just received, Wang Chong had a total of 90 destiny energy on him. This was not a small amount of wealth. Just thinking about it made Wang Chong feel delighted. With so many destiny energy, I should be able to exchange for that item. Suddenly recalling a matter, Wang Chong quickly communicated with the Stone of Destiny in his mind. Of the 5 destinies, Wang Chong opened the physique, which represented the body. Upon seeing the Destiny Battle Armor option, Wang Chong's heart skipped a beat, and his soul seemed to have left his body. I really want to see what the Destiny Battle Armor looks like. Wang Chong's heart was in turmoil. He really wanted to exchange for the Destiny Battle Armor right now. Steed, weapon, and armor, these were the 3 things that could protect one's life on the battlefield. Wang Chong had everything on him, but he didn't have a suitable armor. The Destiny Battle Armor cost 80 points, and with the amount of points Wang Chong had on him, he could easily exchange for it. However, Wang Chong only thought about it for a moment before dispelling the thought. The 3rd restriction of the world force is coming soon. If I exchange for this battle armor, I won't have enough points at that time. 10 destiny energy isn't enough to clear this trial. By then, I'll really be dead. Wang Chong took in a deep breath. Even though he was reluctant to part with it, he still turned to the last line. Gold organs. This was a new reward from the Stone of Destiny. It would only appear when one had 100 points and above. In his mind, the explanation for the gold organs was, after exchanging for the gold organs, the rate of absorption of World Essence Qi and recovery of World Essence Qi had greatly increased. This was exactly what Wang Chong needed right now. With a thought, Wang Chong decisively exchanged for the gold organs. Chapter 282. Panglong. Just when Wang Chong thought that this was the end of the transformation, there was a sudden jolt. A majestic and heavy energy reminiscent of golden fluid gushed into Wang Chong's chest from the void and into every single one of his lungs. For an instant, Wang Chong felt as though he was suffocating. That intense energy was scalding, viscous, and scorching. It filled every single one of his lungs and cells, leaving Wang Chong unable to breathe at all. The heavy weight increased the pressure on his lungs and upper body significantly, such that he felt as though he was going to collapse. Just when Wang Chong felt that he was on the verge of collapsing, the heavy and scorching golden fluid suddenly shot out, revealing an opening. As though a drowning man, Wang Chong struggled to rise to the surface. In the study, Wang Chong took in a deep breath. Even the maids and servants shuttling to and fro outside the room could hear him clearly. How unbearable! As expected, it isn't that easy to obtain powerful energy. Wang Chong thought as his body heaved up and down violently. The 5 viscera and 6 bowels were the softest and weakest existences in the human body, and it was also an area that was extremely difficult to cultivate. Even the strongest experts could only strengthen their 5 viscera and 6 bowels slightly due to the existence of origin energy. As for cultivation techniques that focused on strengthening the 5 viscera and 6 bowels, there was no such thing. This was also the first time Wang Chong had encountered such a thing. In terms of strengthening one's physical body, the golden organs was definitely one of the best physical body strengthening techniques out there, even surpassing the dragon bone art. Back then, when Wang Chong first saw this reward in the Stone of Destiny, he couldn't help but feel delighted, and he was tempted to exchange for it. But back then, due to the restraints of the world energy, Wang Chong dared not exchange for it at all. It was only when Zhang Munian's elementary superior rice appeared that his wish was fulfilled. Buzz! His body was warm. As he breathed heavily, Wang Chong could clearly feel the golden liquid from the hundreds of large and small alveoli in his chest seeping into his heart, liver, spleen, kidneys, and other internal organs. The boiling energy flowed into every cell, and finally, it slowly merged with the cells in these places. An experience he had never experienced before surged into his heart. Wang Chong felt that his body was as light as a feather, and it was getting lighter. Not only that, but as the energy of the golden juice organs continued to fuse with his body, Yang Ji also had a strange feeling in his heart, as if he was soaking in water. This feeling wasn't obvious at first, but it grew stronger and stronger as time went on. It was as if he wasn't surrounded by air, but a viscous liquid. So this is the golden viscera. Wang Chong slowly sensed the changes in his body and finally understood why the golden organs could change the affinity between a martial artist and heaven-earth Yuan Qi. In the past, although Wang Chong could feel the existence of heaven-earth Yuan Qi, it was only a feeling, and it was subjective. But now it was different. Wang Chong felt that he could even touch it with his palm, as if he was touching something real. Not only that, Wang Chong could even feel the flow of energy in the air. However, the range of this perception was not large, only about 5 or 6 zhang. But this was already very powerful. Even a true martial realm or profound martial realm martial artist might not be able to do this. This is really inconceivable. The Stone of Destiny's ability is completely different from the world of martial arts. Many of its abilities can't be estimated with common sense. Wang Chong shook his head and praised in his heart. He stretched out a finger, and a stream of energy that was hard to see with the naked eye flowed through the air. It was easily wrapped around by Wang Chong's fingertip and then absorbed into his body. Although the amount of energy absorbed was not a lot, this kind of purposeful and targeted absorption of Yuan Qi was much more efficient than normal. If he wanted to, Wang Chong could absorb all the Yuan Qi within 5 or 6 zhang in an instant. In an intense battle where both sides' Yuan Qi was exhausted, this kind of ability would be decisive. Buzz. Standing alone in the study, he closed his eyes and spread his legs apart, motionless. Once the energy of the gold organs in his chest had completely dispersed into his 5 viscera, everything calmed down. Only then did Wang Chong slowly open his eyes. The energy in his body had completely calmed down. Compared to before, Wang Chong could feel that his 5 viscera and 6 bowels were stronger, more resilient, and could withstand greater impacts. Compared to a martial artist of the same level, his 5 viscera and 6 bowels were at least 7 or 8 times stronger. Strange, it seems like my body's strength has increased by quite a bit. Wang Chong's eyes lit up. He suddenly moved his arms, feeling that his strength had increased by quite a bit. He was secretly pleasantly surprised. The gold organs only targeted the internal organs of a martial artist. Not only could it strengthen the heart, liver, spleen, lungs, and kidneys, it could also increase one's strength. This was an unexpected gain. But if this is the case, coupled with the true martial Little Dipper, it will be much easier for me to reach the true martial realm in the future. My strength will also be much stronger. Wang Chong closed his eyes and muttered to himself. 100 feet tall building is built from the earth. The foundation of a building was often determined from the very beginning. If the foundation was unstable, it would be useless no matter how hard one tried to reinforce it. With a lifetime's worth of martial arts experience, Wang Chong couldn't be clearer on this point. It's about time. That person should be here by now. After meditating for another hour in the room and stabilizing his cultivation, Wang Chong glanced at the hourglass on the table before walking out of the study. How is it? Has Lord Zhang arrived? Wang Chong looked at the Wang clan guard outside the study and asked. Reporting to Gongzi, Governor Zhang has just arrived, and he's already waiting in the lounge. The servants have already prepared top-notch tea and pastries. Knowing that Gongzi is cultivating in the study, Madam is already there to receive you. She said that Gongzi will meet the governor immediately after you are done cultivating. The guard outside bowed respectfully. Clearly, he was sent by Wang Chong's mother, and he had been waiting here for quite some time now. I understand. You may leave now. Wang Chong nodded. Flinging his sleeves, he headed straight for the study. Jiannan Governor Zhang Wentuo was an influential figure. Even though his standing couldn't compare to Zhangqiu Jianxiong, the Protector General of the Empire, in Wang Chong's heart, he was definitely one of the most important figures in this life. Back at the banquet, due to Zhangqiu Jianxiong's invitation and the fact that he was ambushed by the Gogurians, Wang Chong didn't find it appropriate to talk to him. It was just that Zhang Xian remembered the other party's face and made an appointment with the Jiannan prefect 2 days ago. The time was set by Wang Chong, and since this was their first meeting, Wang Chong didn't want to leave a good impression on the Jiannan governor. Thus, he chose the time carefully. Passing through many gardens, ponds, and corridors, Wang Chong finally met Zhang Wentuo in the lounge of the Wang clan. There was a faint fragrance of tea in the room. When Wang Chong walked in, his mother was chatting with the Jiannan governor, who had come to the capital to report on his work. Upon seeing Wang Chong enter, Madame Wang immediately stood up from her seat. Chonga, it's rare for Lord Governor to visit our Wang clan as a guest. Madame Wang seemed to have a good impression of the governor of Jiannan. After leaving those words behind, she left with her maids and servants. Lord Governor. Wang Chong straightened his robe, straightened his expression, walked over and gave a respectful bow. You're too polite, Chong Gongzi. Zhang Wentuo hurriedly stood up from his seat and returned the greeting. While returning the greeting, Zhang Wentuo assessed the legendary Gongzi of the capital in astonishment. In a place like the capital, Zhang Wentuo was definitely a legendary figure. Many of the things that he had done were inconceivable even to an adult like Zhang Wentuo. However, Zhang Wentuo couldn't understand why this legendary Gongzi of the capital would invite him over. He had lived in Jiannan for a long time, and other than the annual reporting on his work, he had never spent much time in the capital. As such, he had never interacted with this Wang Gongzi before him. The Wang clan was a clan of ministers and generals, and Duke Jiao was an esteemed and virtuous minister. Under normal circumstances, Zhang Wentuo wouldn't be able to associate with such a prestigious clan. Only Protector General Zhangqiu Jianxiong was qualified to interact with them. Zhang Wentuo couldn't understand why Wang Gongzi would bring him up when they had never met before. Not only that, he even brought him up at Protector General Zhangqiu Jianxiong's banquet, even issuing such a bizarre invitation 2 days ago. The main reason why Zhang Wentuo agreed to the invitation was due to this doubt. He's indeed a ferocious man. While Zhang Wentuo was assessing him, Wang Chong was doing the same as well. Even though there were many governors in the Tang dynasty, the one before him would definitely become the most famous one in a few years' time, leaving his name in the annals of history. Even though it was all because of his dishonorable conduct which was known to the world. 180,000 elites of the Tang dynasty, hundreds of thousands of civilians, a war that shook the entire Central Plains, and a war that would change the fate of the Tang dynasty and the surrounding powers, all of this was because of the dishonorable actions of this Jiannan prefect. If the fall of the Tang dynasty could be described as a chain reaction of dominoes, then Zhang Wentuo, the Jianan prefect, would be the first one to fall. For any shocking event, there would always be a fuse that would be lit first. And Zhang Wentuo was the one who had lit this fuse. There was only a thin line between peace and war. It was this person who had single-handedly ended the 200 years of peace of the Tang dynasty, leading the country into a chaotic future. If chaos and destruction had to have a person who would sound the death knell, then this person before him was definitely that person. Just that, Zhang Wentuo himself probably didn't know of this matter. Other than Wang Chong, no one else in the entire Tang dynasty knew of this matter. However, he was different from those who hated Zhang Wentuo to the core. Chapter 283. Translated by Hypersheep 325. Zhang Wentuo was a tall and burly man with a squarish face. From him, Wang Chong could sense an intense militaristic aura. It was the same aura that he felt from his father and the regular soldiers. Looking at the figure before him, Wang Chong found it hard to believe that this was the man who coveted the wife and daughter of King Jelifeng of Mengshizhao. Seizing the opportunity when they arrived at the capital, he lured them into the city lord manor to rape and murder them. Eventually, in a fit of rage, King Jelifeng mobilized the entire Mengshizhao to exact vengeance for his wife and daughter, thus launching an attack on Great Tang. In the end, that massive war that shook the entire Tang dynasty. Jelifeng might have been ambitious, but if not for the provocation of his wife and daughter's death, he might not have been so bold as to mobilize the entire empire to launch such a massive war. More importantly, no matter how ambitious Jelifeng was, only the Tang dynasty could deal with him. But his wife and daughter were innocent. As the Jianan commander-in-chief, Zhang Wentuo's actions were deeply shameful, even to ordinary people. This caused the Tang dynasty to lose its moral high ground, and it also lost the excuse to deal with Mengshizhao in the future. In fact, even the people of Jianan who suffered the most after the 180,000 soldiers died in the war were filled with sympathy for King Jelifeng of Mengshizhao. Such a ridiculous matter had never happened before in any of the dynasties before the Tang dynasty. As the instigator of all of this, Zhang Wentuo became the sinner of the Tang dynasty, and he was hated by everyone. As these thoughts flashed across Wang Chong's mind, he quickly regained his composure. "Lord, this way please." Wang Chong calmly suppressed his thoughts and gestured Jianan Prefecture Chief Zhang Qiantuo to sit back down. "Wang Gongzi, I'm indebted to you for taking care of me. May I know why you invited me to your residence?" Zhang Wentuo had the style of a soldier, so he didn't like to beat around the bush. After seeing Wang Chong for a few seconds, he immediately went straight to the point. "Haha, I wonder how the governor and the protector general are doing in the capital?" Wang Chong didn't mention the reason why he invited Zhang Wentuo over. Instead, he asked him about the matter regarding the emperor's visit to the royal palace. As he spoke, he picked up the teapot on the table and poured himself a cup of tea. Fortunately, His Majesty didn't say anything. "If nothing goes wrong, I should be returning to Jianan in a few days' time." Zhang Wentuo frowned, but he didn't say anything. So fast. Wang Chong was surprised. It had only been a few days since Zhang Wentuo arrived in the capital, so it was truly surprising that he would return to Jianan so quickly. "I came to the capital this time mainly for Protector General. Now that the report is done, it's time to go back," Zhang Wentuo explained patiently. He had never been a person who was good at socializing. Even in Jianan, he didn't get along well with Protector General Zhangqiu Jianxiong and General Xinyu Zhongtong, needless to say, Wang Chong. "Hehe, the southwest isn't as prosperous and affluent as the capital. Since it's rare for Lord to come to the capital, why don't you stay here for a while longer? This way, Wang Chong can play his role as the host. The Silk Flower Pavilion in the west of the city is a place where scholars and refined guests visit. Since Lord is always in a hurry, why don't you have Wang Chong bring you to the Silk Flower Pavilion?" As Wang Chong spoke, he assessed Zhang Wentuo carefully, not letting go of the slightest change in his expression. His eyes were filled with probing intent. "Wang Gongzi." Unexpectedly, right after Wang Chong said those words, Zhang Wentuo suddenly bellowed and stood up. His eyes were cold and filled with rage. "I, Jing Gongzi, am a descendant of Duke Jiao. That's why I'm here. I didn't expect Gongzi to bring me to that despicable brothel. Wang Gongzi, I've misjudged you. If there's nothing else, I'll be taking my leave." At this point, his face was filled with displeasure. Wang Chang's words had truly left him astonished. Silk Flower Pavilion sounded pleasant, but it was actually a famous brothel in the capital. Even someone like him, who rarely went there, knew of it, needless to say, others. Zhang Wentuo didn't expect Wang Chong to invite him to a brothel. Perhaps it was a trend among the scholars in the capital, but it definitely wasn't him. What kind of person did he think he was? At this point, anger flashed in Zhang Wentuo's eyes. "Ah, Lord, please forgive me. I was just casually mentioning the Silk Flower Pavilion. Since Lord isn't fond of it, just pretend that Wang Chong didn't say anything. I have misunderstood Lord, and I apologize to Lord Prefecture Chief. I beseech Lord Prefecture Chief to forgive me." Wang Chong had been staring at Zhang Wentuo the entire time, and upon seeing Zhang Wentuo getting angry and getting up to leave, a glint flashed across Wang Chong's eyes. Silk Flower Pavilion? Of course it couldn't be true. This was where he was, and his mother wasn't too far away. How could Wang Chong invite Zhang Wentuo to a brothel? This was just a probe. Zhang Wentuo was angry, and he was truly furious. However, as the one who started it all, Wang Chong was delighted. At the very least, there was one thing that Wang Chong was certain of. Zhang Wentuo wasn't a lecherous person. Regardless of whether it was his personality or his way of doing things, it was the straightforward style of a regular soldier of the Tang dynasty. Wang Chong was straightforward. Knowing that he had made a mistake, he stood up and bowed respectfully to Zhang Wentuo to apologize. For a moment, Zhang Wentuo didn't take it too seriously. After all, Wang Chong was only 15. Under Wang Chong's persistent pestering, Zhang Wentuo could only return to his seat. "Lord Zhang, actually, the reason why I invited you here is because I have a request, and I hope that Lord Prefecture Chief can agree to it." Wang Chong said, "Oh, Gongzi, feel free to speak your mind." Zhang Wentuo turned to Wang Chong said, "It's regarding the Lion Rock Ridge. Hasn't Lord Prefecture Chief already agreed to Gongzi's request?" Zhang Wentuo asked in astonishment. "Jianan Road is far from here, and building a base requires a huge amount of resources and time. In this aspect, Lord Prefecture Chief isn't able to provide much help. This is Wang Chong's first time in Jianan, so I hope that Lord Prefecture Chief can lend me some help." Wang Chong said earnestly, "If Gongzi wishes to build anything, feel free to speak. I might just be able to help you in this aspect." Zhang Wentuo pondered for a moment before nodding. The Lion Rock Mountain was located far away, and the Wang clan was a clan of generals and ministers. If they were to build a base there, it would definitely cost a lot of resources, so they could only use local materials. If that was the case, it would be beneficial to Jiannan's economy as well. As such, Zhang Wentuo didn't mind helping Wang Chong. Following that, Wang Chong and Zhang Wentuo chatted a lot about the specifics. Although it was announced to the public that it was to build a base for trading on the Tea-Horse Road. However, only Wang Chong knew that it was a huge city. From this aspect, it could be said that Zhang Wentuo, the prefect of this place, was indeed a great help. Moreover, with his help, Zhang Shouji's work over there would be much smoother, and the construction time would be greatly advanced. The latter was what Wang Chong valued the most. "Young master." Just as Wang Chong and Zhang Wentuo were chatting excitedly, the sound of hurried footsteps suddenly sounded from outside. Following which, a loud bang sounded and the door was pushed open from the outside. A green-robed servant rushed in and interrupted the conversation between Wang Chong and Zhang Wentuo. Wang Chong frowned. Didn't he say it before? When there are guests in the house, do not disturb. "Young master, the great master is here. He said that he has something important to tell you and wants you to see him immediately." The green-clothed servant was panting, and before Wang Chong could reprimand him, he spoke first. Wang Chong was taken aback. There was no such thing as a great old master in the Wang clan. There was only one person whom the servants would address as such, and that was Wang Chong's big uncle Wang Zhen. "Why is uncle here?" Wang Chong asked doubtfully. At this time, he should be busy dealing with Shangqiu Jianxiong. The dispute over the Minister of War's position was currently at its peak, so he shouldn't be busy at all. Why would he come to Wang Chang's residence? On top of that, he even had a servant call him over, saying that he had something important to discuss with him. Wang Gongzi, since you have matters to attend to, I won't disturb you any longer. I'll be taking my leave first. If there's anything you need, feel free to contact me in the future. Understanding Wang Chang's intentions, Zhang Wentuo immediately stood up and bade farewell. Wang Chong pondered for a moment before nodding. After sending Zhang Wentuo off, Wang Chong summoned Solitary Wolf. Gongzi, you were looking for me? Solitary Wolf walked over and asked. I have something for you to do. Do you still remember that we are going to build a base in Jiannan's Lion Rock Ridge? Wang Chong said, Lord, you wish for me to oversee the construction of the Lion Rock Ridge? That's not it. Wang Chong shook his head without any hesitation. I want you to follow Jiannan Prefecture Chief Zhang Wentuo in my name. No matter what, I want you to stay within the Prefecture Chief manor. If possible, befriend the Jiannan Prefecture Chief's children and stay within the Prefecture Chief manor to observe the happenings there. No matter what happens in there, I want you to send me a messenger pigeon every 10 days, 3 a month. If anything happens, you have to inform me separately. Lone Wolf exclaimed in a low voice, completely stunned. He didn't expect that Wang Chong would entrust him with such a task. Solitary Wolf, I'm not asking you to be a spy. This matter is extremely important. Can you do it? As he said those words, Wang Chang's expression was incomparably solemn. Gongzi, rest assured. As long as it's Gongzi's orders, I'll definitely accomplish it. Solitary Wolf replied without any hesitation. They were indebted to Wang Chong, and if not for him, they would have to live with humiliation for the rest of their lives. Putting aside such a small matter, Wang Chong would definitely accomplish it no matter how difficult it was. And there's one more thing. I want you to keep an eye on Jiannan Prefecture Chief Zhang Wentuo at all times. If anything happens to the Prefecture Chief manor, or if Zhang Wentuo tries to commit suicide, I want you to bring him out of Jiannan and the Prefecture Chief manor no matter what. Can you do this? Hearing Wang Chang's words, Solitary Wolf's expression suddenly turned bizarre. Ever since he retired 15 years ago, Solitary Wolf had accepted countless jobs as a mercenary. But Solitary Wolf had never heard of such a bizarre request before. Why would something happen to the Prefecture Chief manor? That was the Prefecture Chief manor, not some ordinary place. Which madman would be so crazy as to lay his hands on the Prefecture Chief manor? Furthermore, Zhang Wentuo was a perfectly fine person, so why would he commit suicide? He had also taken a look before he left the manor. That person had a well-built body and was filled with vitality. When he walked, he exuded a majestic aura that even demons would have to avoid. Why would such a person commit suicide? Solitary Wolf had weathered countless storms in his life, but he had never encountered such a bizarre matter. Yes, Gongzi. I'll get it done now. Even though Solitary Wolf was doubtful, he didn't hesitate in the slightest. Gongzi, rest assured. I'll treat it as a job, and no matter what, I'll definitely complete the task Gongzi has entrusted to me. Chapter 284. After settling the matters in the southwest, Wang Chong went alone to see his big uncle, Wang Zhen. Chonga, the Imperial Army's Director of Military Affairs, Li Qingyu, has come to see me. He wants to buy your Wuzi steel sword. Upon seeing Wang Chong, Wang Zhen immediately went straight to the point. What? Wang Chong had only just stepped into the hall when he heard these words, and his entire body froze in shock. And then an indescribable ecstasy swept over him like a raging tide, engulfing him. Li Qingyu. Upon hearing this name, Wang Chong knew that the thing he had been hoping for the most had happened, the imperial court's purchase. Even without the memories of his last life, Wang Chong deeply understood what this name signified. In the Tang dynasty, the name Li Qingyu was associated with only one thing: purchase. Whether it was the Zhang, Lu, Huang, or Cheng clans of the capital, or the swordsmiths and shops of the capital, once the imperial army's purchase was involved, it would be the personal responsibility of the Director of Military Affairs, Li Qingyu. Wang Chong had heard the head of the Zhang clan mention this several times. But to Wang Chong, this name had a special meaning that only he knew. It was precisely this director of military affairs, Li Qingyu, who had led the largest purchase of Wuxi steel in the history of the Central Plains in his last life. Although that purchase had failed for various reasons, it had been forever engraved in history. Based on his calculations, it should have been another 1 or 2 years before this matter would occur. Wang Chong was not at all surprised that this matter had occurred so early. The only thing he had not expected was for it to happen so quickly. 2 days ago, he had sent a message to the capital's Zhang clan, making an exception and allowing them to purchase 30 Wuxi steel swords a month. His goal was to expand his influence in the imperial army. Their ultimate target was Li Qingyu, the military affairs officer of the imperial army who was in charge of the purchase of military equipment in the palace. Wang Chong believed that as long as the military affairs officer, who held an important position in the imperial army, saw his Wuxi steel weapon with his own eyes, he would definitely win his favor. If Li Qingyu did not have a special fondness for Wuxi steel weapons, he would not have spent so much effort and money to convince the imperial court to purchase Wuxi steel. However, Wang Chong did not expect Li Qingyu to act so quickly. It had only been 2 days, but Wang Chong had already made his move, even inviting his big uncle Wang Zhen over. I didn't expect this. This is really a pleasant surprise. Wang Chong clenched his fists tightly, feeling extremely excited. Wuxi steel was very precious and could bring in a lot of profits. However, this kind of profit had its limits. The rarer an object is, the greater its value. Even though the weapon that Wang Chong sold to the Grand Marshal of the Imperial Army was worth 200,000 gold taels, this was something that the commoners would never dream of. However, he could only sell a single such weapon every month. Furthermore, there was no guarantee that it would appear in the future. It would take Wang Chong an entire year to earn 2 million gold taels, and what Wang Chong lacked the most at this moment was time. There was nothing faster than selling it to the imperial court. Not everyone was able to afford 200,000 gold taels for a single weapon like the Grand Marshal of the Imperial Army. However, the imperial court was different. The potential of the imperial court was nearly limitless. In Wang Chong's plan, the best seller for the Hyderabad ores was the imperial court. However, he had to grasp this opportunity well. If it was too early, the Wuxi steel would be worthless. The imperial court might not be willing to buy it, and they wouldn't be able to afford it either. Now was the best time to do so. Wang Gongzi, nice to meet you. Under Big Uncle Wang Zhen's lead, Wang Chong met with the famous director of military affairs, Li Qingyu, in the Jade Tavern in the west of the city. Lord Li, you're being too polite. Wang Chong smiled. As he spoke, he sat down opposite of Li Qingyu with a dignified expression. Director of military affairs, Li Qingyu, was an elusive existence in the Tang dynasty. His activities were mostly within the royal palace, and his movements were extremely discreet. Even when he visited the prestigious swordsmithing clans, he would come and go in a hurry, taking less than an incense's time. Even though Wang Chong had heard of his name, this was his first time meeting him. Lord Wang should have told you about it, right? Li Qingyu's style of doing things was extremely straightforward. As soon as he sat down, he went straight to the point. The imperial court wishes to purchase 1,000 Wuxi steel weapons from Gongzi. Since Lord Li is so straightforward, I'll be frank as well. I'm unable to purchase 1,000 Wuxi steel weapons. Wang Chong shrugged with a smile. Oh, why? Is it because the price is too low? A glint flashed across Li Qingyu's eyes. Pardon my bluntness, but it's impossible for the imperial court to purchase the weapons at the same price as Gongzi's. 20,000 gold taels for a single weapon isn't a low price. Indeed, given the current market for Wuxi steel weapons that Wang Chong had a grasp of, 20,000 gold taels for a single weapon was indeed a low price. However, this had always been the case for the imperial court's purchases. Lord Li misunderstands. Wang Chong chuckled. It's not that I'm unwilling, but that I can't sell them. But because I only have 100 ingots of Wuxi steel. Wang Chong chuckled. From Arloja and Ablanadin, Wang Chong had only obtained 300 jun in total. Yet, Li Qingyu wanted 1,000 ingots here. How could he possibly have so many? No matter how high Li Qingyu's price was, he couldn't afford it. However, the reason why Wang Chong invited Li Qingyu over wasn't to talk about this. Pardon my bluntness, but the reason why Lord Li wants these Wuzi steel weapons is because you want to build an army of Wuzi steel weapons, right? However, is 1,000 weapons really enough? Wang Chong chuckled. The people of the Tang dynasty were truly intelligent. Imperial Army Commander Zhao Fengchen had mentioned to him more than once about the possibilities of building an army with Wuzi steel weapons. It was the same for Li Qingyu as well. At first glance, these people were able to recognize the military value of the sharp Wuzi steel. And this was what the future Abbasid Caliphate did. Anyone who saw the Wuzi steel weapons would immediately realize the immense military value it held. This, Li Qingyu was taken aback. He had only intended to purchase a batch of weapons to test it out with the Imperial Army. He hadn't thought about the details. Lord Li, 1,000 men is definitely insufficient to build an army of Wuzi steel weapons. Furthermore, 20,000 gold taels per weapon is indeed a little low. However, if Lord Li is willing to pay me 8 million gold taels in advance, I might be able to find a way to equip an army of 10,000 men within 5 years. In fact, I can even lower the price of the Wuzi steel weapons to 18,000 gold taels for you. Wang Chong said. By the side, Wang Chong's big uncle frowned. However, Li Qingyu's eyes lit up. The 10,000 Wuzi steel weapons that Wang Chong mentioned were secondary. What caught his attention was Wang Chong's 18,000 gold taels. Is 8 million gold taels sufficient? Li Qingyu asked. It was just an ordinary sentence, but it sounded powerful and domineering in the cluster of Jade Tavern. Even Wang Chong couldn't help but look at Wang Chong in awe. He sure is rich. Wang Chong thought. This was the difference between the military affairs supervisor of the royal court and the prestigious clans. 8 million taels of gold was a huge sum of money even for the great clans in the capital. It was an unbearably huge sum. However, to the military affairs supervisor of the Imperial Army, who often made large purchases, it was nothing more than a drizzle. As the military affairs supervisor of the Imperial Army, Li Qingyu had the backing of the entire Tang dynasty. This was the difference brought about by the weight class. The more Wang Chong thought about it, the more he felt that his plan and rules were correct. Li Qingyu reached an agreement with Wang Chong at the fastest speed possible, and he made use of this opportunity to have Wang Chong write down the contents of his promise on a document. Words were no proof, and documents were the only proof. As the military affairs supervisor, Li Qingyu was already used to it. Chong, why did you agree to his request? Won't we be making a huge loss this way? Walking out of the cluster of Jade Tavern, Wang Chong's big uncle, Wang Zhen, couldn't help but ask. The Wang clan was bound together for good and bad. Even though the one who was going to lose out was Wang Chong, Wang Zhen didn't think that he had nothing to do with this matter. Big uncle, he has already come knocking on our door. Do you think that we can still reject him? Wang Chong chuckled. Wang Zhen was taken aback. If it was just Li Qingyu, he wouldn't have cared at all. He could have just rejected him. However, Wang Zhen knew that the one standing behind Li Qingyu was the Holy Emperor. This was also the reason why Wang Zhen didn't say a single word throughout the entire tavern. Big uncle, don't worry. We won't be losing out on this matter. Wang Chong consoled with a smile. He knew what his big uncle was conflicted about. The reason why Li Qingyu went to Wang Zhen instead of looking for him or big uncle Li Lin in the Imperial Army was to lower his price. This was also the reason why his big uncle was conflicted. However, Wang Chong was different. He wasn't too worried about this matter. 5 years. Who knows what will happen in 5 years? As Wang Chong spoke those words that only he could hear, he couldn't help but sigh in awe. 10,000 weapons in 5 years. Even Li Qingyu probably didn't realize the significance of the deal he had just struck with Wang General. Too many things could happen in 5 years. If that calamity didn't happen within 5 years, if he was still alive after 5 years, he might just be able to fulfill his deal with Li Qingyu. Shaking his head, Wang Chong quickly recovered from his daze. 8 million gold taels. I'll have to spend at least 3 to 5 million gold taels on Lion City. The rest can be used to carry out the next step of my plan. After bidding farewell to big uncle Wang Zhen, Wang Chong gazed at the clouds in the sky, and his heart was in turmoil. The lion city of Jianan was a bottomless pit. Before him, there had never been a case of a private city being constructed in the Tang dynasty. Given the capabilities of a single person, this was still too much of a burden. But in Wang Chong's heart, the lion city was the most important thing to him at the moment. No matter how much money he had to spend, he was determined to carry it out. This was also the reason why he requested an advance payment of several million gold taels from the imperial army. All kinds of barriers, defenses, rations, and even the repair of weapons, there were simply too many things involved. Even 5 million gold taels might not be enough. But even so, with this sum of money, he should be able to achieve the effect he wanted. Now, it was time for him to move on to the next matter. Chapter 285. Translated by Hypersheep 325. Wang Chong received Ablonidon and Ablonidon in his residence. It had been a long time since they last met, and the two monks had clearly gotten much tanner, as if they had been exposed to the sun. After Wang Chong spent several months in the Kunwa training camp, the two of them returned to Sindh. One reason was that they needed to report to the high priest, and the other reason was that Sindhu was currently experiencing a rare civil war. How could the two of them remain idle over such a major matter? No matter what, they had to return to take a look. Gongzi! Upon seeing Wang Chong, the two monks immediately clasped their hands together and bowed deeply. What was even more surprising was that the two monks, who usually only spoke Sindhi, were actually speaking to Wang Chong in the unfamiliar language of the Central Plains. From this, one could easily imagine how much respect they had for him. He, great monk, there's no need to be so polite. Wang Chong waved his hands with a smile. Ablonidon and Ablonidon had stayed in the Wang Chong residence for a period of time, and they had even taught Wang Chong the tortoise-breathing art and arm connection art. As a result, Wang Chong was already on good terms with them. When they first met, they would still call him Grandmaster, but as their relationship grew closer, they would just call him Great Monk. This was a sign of their close relationship. Of course, to us Sindhi, Gongzi is a true living bodhisattva, a great Buddha who has truly saved us. Gongzi, please accept our bow. With reddened eyes, the two pressed their palms together and insisted on bowing to Wang Chong once more. If they hadn't returned to Sindhu, they wouldn't have known what the situation was like there. Although Sindh suffered from famine all year round, and people would die every year, there had never been so many deaths. Starving corpses, skeletons, and flies were everywhere. If not for Wang Chong's food, who knew how many more people would have died? The two of them had heartfelt respect for Wang Chong. Seeing how insistent the two monks were, Wang Chong knew that they weren't doing this for him but for the Sindhi. Thus, he didn't say anything else. Just from the expressions of the two, Wang Chong could tell that the situation in Sindh had improved significantly. Since Sindh's condition can be alleviated, that's good. However, great monk, it is better to teach a man to fish than to give him a fish. If Sindh wants to break free from starvation, it can only rely on itself. What I can do is only a cup of water on a burning cart of firewood. I can treat the symptoms but not the root cause. Great monk, those who help themselves are helped by the heavens. In the end, Sindh can only rely on itself. Wang Chong said, the relationship between him and Arloja and Ablanja was purely based on interests. However, Arloja and Ablanja's respect for him touched him a little, which was why he said those words. The famine in Sindhu wasn't a temporary one, but a perennial one. This wasn't without reason. In this transaction with Arloja and Ablanja, he had sent them a lot of rations, cows, goats, chickens, and ducks. If Sindhu was good at making use of the rations, they could just leave a portion of the rations to plant and raise the cows, goats, chickens, and ducks. The cows and goats could give birth next year, and the chickens and ducks could lay eggs. If the Sindhi were good at making use of the rations, the famine might be greatly alleviated, or, if they were diligent enough, they might even be able to put an end to it. However, Wang Chong knew that it was impossible. The rations and livestock he had sent over would only be eaten up. The Sindhi high priest had only been thinking of treating the symptoms. As for treating the root cause, it probably wasn't within his considerations. This made Wang Chong recall a joke he had heard in the past. A neighbor saw that a man's family was so poor that he didn't know where his next meal would come from. Out of kindness, he wanted to help the man improve his family's circumstances and lift him out of poverty. Thus, he spent a huge sum of money to buy a cow that could give birth to calves for the man, urging him to let the cow graze well. When the cow gave birth next year, his life would become much better. In the beginning, the man also worked hard and made up his mind to change his past decadence and treat the cow well. He wanted to change his life and escape from poverty. However, he soon couldn't stand the hunger. Thinking that cows were more valuable than goats, he decided to sell the cow and buy a sheep. In any case, sheep could also give birth, and the extra money could be used to fill his stomach. However, out of worry for his neighbor, he struggled for a long time. In the end, he sold the cow and bought a sheep, and enjoyed a hearty meal. However, the money he earned from selling the cow and sheep was quickly spent. Thus, the man thought that since sheep were more valuable than chickens, and chickens could also lay eggs, he could sell the sheep for a chicken. With the extra money, he would be able to eat his fill. Unfamiliar the first time, but familiar the second time. This time, he didn't feel any psychological burden. On the third day, the chicken didn't lay eggs for half a day. In a panic, the man decided to kill the chicken and eat it. Thus, after going around for a while, the man's house was still empty, but the cow was gone. This was the situation that Sindhu was currently facing. No matter how many times they saved them, no matter how much food and livestock they gave them, they were still the same Sindhu, impoverished and weak. In the coming year, Sindhu would still face the weakening of the Tang dynasty, and the situation of starvation would continue. However, Wang Chong didn't intend to do anything. Those who fall behind will be beaten. If he wanted to change Sindhu's situation, he could only rely on Sindhu. No one else could help him. Arloja and Eblanidin had awkward looks on their faces. How could they not understand the problems that Sindhu faced? However, this was something that even the high priest was helpless against. All they could do was try their best. Let's not talk about this anymore. Fortunately, Wang Chong flung his sleeves and didn't dwell on this problem. Great monks, the reason why I called you here is because I have a matter to discuss with your high priest. Without beating around the bush, Wang Chong went straight to the point. He didn't summon Arloja and Eblanidin to show concern for the plight of the Sindhi people. Gongzi, please speak. The two immediately said respectfully. I wish to discuss a deal with your high priest regarding the Hyderabad ores. I wish to increase the quota of Hyderabad ores in the Central Plains. Great monks, please don't feel troubled. It won't be too late to reject it after hearing my words. Wang Chong looked at the awkward expressions on the faces of the two monks and smiled as he extended a finger. His expression was confident and calm, brimming with a power that could convince others. 1,000 gold taels. This is the price I am willing to pay for the Hyderabad ores. I believe that the high priest will not reject it. His voice was resounding and resounding. 1,000 gold taels? Arloja and Eblanidin, who were just about to reject it, were stunned. Gongzi, you aren't joking, right? Arloja's eyes widened in shock. He couldn't believe that Wang Chong was serious. This was because the price was much higher than the current price. Of course I'm not joking. Wang Chong chuckled as he stood up from his seat. He exuded a maturity and steadiness that many people of his age lacked, as well as the aura of a leader that others could trust. When together with him, even Arloja and Eblanidin couldn't help but follow his lead. Even when listening to his words, they would pay full attention, afraid that they would miss out on any information he wanted to say. This was a completely involuntary process. At the start, it wasn't like this at all. In fact, the two of them even rejected Wang Chong. There's a reason why I'm offering a high price. I hope that the high priest will sell the largest amount of ores to me this year. Wang Chong raised a finger as he walked toward the duo. The annual production of ores in Hyderabad was very low. In other words, there was a quota. If one place supplied too much, another place would have a corresponding decrease. That's right. Wang Chong wanted to snatch the quotas of Arabia and Charax Spazinu. In his previous life, Arabia and Charax Spazinu relied on their heavily armored army equipped with Wuzi steel scimitars to win the war against the Tang dynasty in the western regions, single-handedly sending the most elite troops of the Tang dynasty to their deaths. Money makes the world go round. Wang Chong wanted to use his enormous wealth to forcefully snatch the quotas of Arabia and Charax Spazinu's Hyderabad ores and nip their Mamelukes in the bud. The superior destroys the conspirators, while the subordinate destroys the soldiers. The most brilliant tactic was to subdue the enemy without fighting. Wang Chong didn't ask for an advance of 8 million from Li Qingyu just to play around, and even more so, not to become a millionaire. After deducting the 5 million required for the lion city of Jiannan, the remaining 3 million was used by Wang Chong to snatch the quotas of Hyderabad ores from Arabia and strike at the Abbasid Caliphate and Charax Spazinu. War didn't necessarily have to be fought with swords and spears. Knocking out the claws and teeth of the other party was still a form of victory. More importantly, the Hyderabad ores project was like a rolling snowball. Finally, the time for Wang Chong to realize his ultimate ambition had arrived. Wang Chong wanted to make use of the huge sum of money he had accumulated from the Hyderabad ores project to build a heavily armored army of Wuzi steel. He wanted to make the Tang dynasty realize the long-cherished wish of his previous life. He wanted to make those fearsome weapons appear in the army of the Tang dynasty and lend them a helping hand. With his wisdom and strength, he wanted to help the Tang dynasty sweep away all the enemies who were eyeing him covetously. Wang Chong knew that the Sindis, including the high priest, would never be able to reject him, because there was an irresistible temptation within. "May I know how much ores Gongzi wants?" Arayo, who had been silent all this while, asked. His expression was grim, and he seemed to be deep in thought. 1,000 gold taels. This was much higher than the price they had sold it to Wang Chong previously. However, the amount of ores in each region of Hyderabad was limited. Adding one region would inevitably affect another. This was a grave matter, and it wasn't something that he could make a decision on. He had to get to the bottom of this, then report to the high priest and let the high priest make the decision. 5,000 June. Chapter 286. Impossible. Arloja and Ablanja trembled and exclaimed at the same time. Perhaps realizing that they had lost their composure, Aloyo hurriedly explained. "Gongzi, it's not that we don't want to sell, but we won't be able to excavate that much in an entire year." The Hyderabad ore was extremely tough, which meant that it was buried in an extremely harsh environment, making it extremely difficult to excavate. The Hyderabad ore wasn't an ordinary ore that could be found on the streets, and its output wasn't high. Even if they gathered all the resources from all the regions, they wouldn't be able to produce 5,000 June of ore in an entire year. Then how much ore can Hyderabad produce in a year? Wang Chong placed his outstretched hand behind his back and asked with a smile. He naturally knew that the output of Hyderabad's ore wasn't that high. He was trying to figure out the true output of Hyderabad's ore so that he could decide how much he needed. 3,000 June. That's the highest output we can estimate right now. And we'll only be able to reach it by the end of the year. If we want to reach the level you speak of, we'll have to increase our manpower and increase the output. Aloyo said seriously. Then why don't we increase the output? In the high priest's plan, he should have added more manpower and increased production, right? Wang Chong said. But even so, that's a matter for next year. We won't be able to gather that much this year. Aloyo said gravely. The price of 1,000 gold taels per June was really too high. It was too tempting. Moreover, it would be beneficial to Sindhu as well. But more importantly, Wang Chong's demand was too high, and Sindhu simply couldn't produce 5,000 June, then we should be able to reach 1,000 June, right? Wang Chong said with a smile. This was his true goal. If he was just talking to the two monks, he wouldn't have to go through so much trouble. But he was talking to the high priest of Sindhu, and the one who could make the decision was the Sindhu high priest that Wang Chong had never met before. The two monks were just his eyes and ears, so he naturally had to play some tricks. This should be barely enough. After a moment of silence, Aloyo finally nodded. However, it should take at least 2 more months. 2 months later, I should be able to gather the number you mentioned. Aloyo had been to the mines of Sindhu and was very familiar with the situation there. Wang Chang's 1,000 jun of ore was basically the limit of Sindhu's output this year. After selling 1,000 jun to Wang Chong, there wouldn't be much left for the year. After all, it was only a few months away from the end of the year. Besides, I can't make the decision on this matter. We still have to ask the high priest. Arroyo said. In the end, as expected, Aloyo indicated that the final decision was still in the hands of the high priest. Of course. Great monk, please tell the high priest that as long as he agrees to my conditions, I can pay 1,000,000 taels of gold in advance. As Wang Chong spoke, he threw out his final bomb. There will always be brave men with great rewards. Arloja and Aloyo walked out of the gate of the Wang family in a trance. Wang Chong smiled with satisfaction as he looked at the shocked expressions on their faces and their dejected backs. 1,020,000 taels. This was more than 10 times more than the previous transaction. Just 90,000 taels of gold was enough to make Sindhu go wild with joy. Now it was 1,000,000 taels of gold. To the famished Sindhu, this was an irresistible temptation. Wang Chong knew that his plan would definitely succeed. Even Arloja and Aloyo would do their best to persuade the Sindhu high priest for the sake of Sindhu's interests. Gongzi, isn't this really worth it? 1,000,000 taels of gold isn't a small sum. Old Eagle said as he watched the backs of the two monks depart. Since he was going to follow Wang Chong and the Wang clan, he needed to understand his own clan. He also had some understanding of the Hyderabad ore. But 1,000,000 taels of gold was truly too much. Gold is just a type of metal. You'll understand in the future. Wang Chong chuckled, not bothering to explain. Zhang Shouji was helping to construct the Lion City in the southwest. Li Zhuxin was looking after Zhang Munian in Jiaoji. Solitary Wolf would represent him to negotiate with Zhang Wentua. And as for the Sindhu high priest, even though Wang Chong had never met the high priest before, he was confident that the massive sum of 1,000,000 taels of gold would be enough to move the high priest. The Arabs still hadn't grasped the forging technique for Wuzi steel, so it would be a waste even if they obtained the Hyderabad ore. Regardless of whether it was in terms of technology or wealth, they were no match for him. Everything was on the right track. He had finally accomplished something that he had never dared to imagine in his previous life. Once he was done with this matter, he would be able to return to the Kunwa training camp and focus on his martial arts. Right now, there's only that matter left. Wang Chong said to himself, a figure flitting through his mind. The reason why he was heading down the mountain this time was because Protector General Zhangzhou Jianqiong was entering the city. On the other hand, there was another matter that Wang Chong had on his mind that he wanted to investigate. It wasn't convenient for Wang Chong to do this while he was in the Kunwa training camp. However, with the backing of the Wang clan, it should be much easier for him to investigate this matter. The Eagle, how's the progress on the person I asked you to investigate? Is there any news? Wang Chang's voice was much softer than before. The Eagle subconsciously exclaimed. As if awakened from a dream, a serious expression appeared on his face. This was a request that Wang Chong had made after killing King Sojurim. Ever since he, Solitary Eagle, Steel Arms, and the others had sworn an oath to follow Wang Chong, this was the first time Wang Chong had asked him for a favor. Thus, the Eagle viewed this matter with great importance. Gongzi, I've asked my friends in the Bureau of Military Personnel and Bureau of Punishments to investigate that student from the Kunwa training camp, and they have a rough idea of his background. Gongzi's intuition isn't wrong. There's indeed something wrong with the information he left behind. Also, we've checked the place Gongzi mentioned. Even though we don't know what's going on, we can tell that this matter has something to do with Duke of Lu. Duke of Lu. Wang Chong was taken aback. He only knew that there was more to the matter than met the eye, but he didn't think that it would implicate someone of Duke of Lu's level. Are you certain? Wang Chong asked hesitantly. Not only so, I also discovered something that might interest Gongzi. Gongzi probably isn't aware of it, but not too long after you left the Kunwa training camp, that person left as well. The Eagle said. The more he looked into the matter, the more interested he became in that person. After following Wang Chong, the eagle gradually realized that no matter how ordinary Wang Chong's arrangements might seem, they weren't as simple as they seemed. A glint flashed across Wang Chong's eyes. Back then he was so focused on dealing with the Gogurians and King Sojurim that he didn't notice this matter. You mean to say that he's following me? Or is it just an accident, a coincidence? I've looked into it, and even though he left the Kanwa training camp together with Gongzi, he doesn't seem to have any interaction with Gongzi in the capital. It's likely to be a coincidence. The eagle said. Even if Wang Chong hadn't asked about this matter, he would have told him anyway. Even though it hadn't been long since he took over that young man's matter, the eagle was already interested in the matter that Wang Chong had arranged for him. On top of that, that young man is extremely alert. It isn't easy to find him amidst the complicated architecture of the capital. However, after sending a few nightingales to patrol the surroundings of the Duke of Lu residence, I did discover something interesting. The Duke of Lu residence hasn't been peaceful recently. A masked fellow has been loitering around the residence late at night, seemingly intent on doing something. At the end, the eagle couldn't help but chuckle. Hearing the bizarre laughter of the eagle, Wang Chong fell into deep thought. You mean to say that, Gongzi, you'll know once you take a look? The eagle smiled. There were many dukes in the Tang dynasty, and these dukes came from all over the world. The reasons for their conferment varied as well, and it was extremely complicated. Some were conferred their titles due to their outstanding contributions in the war, some were conferred their titles due to their high prestige, some were conferred their titles due to their contributions to the emperor, some were conferred their titles due to their meritorious service to the emperor, saving a certain emperor in a certain era, or having in-laws with the royal family. In any case, the Tang dynasty had conferred quite a few dukes in the past 200 years, of which, a portion of them enjoyed the patronage of their fathers and bore the title of duke, but they were already in name only. They no longer possessed the ability to discuss politics with the emperor, but the royal court still favored them, granting them the salary and treatment of a duke. The Duke of Lu was such an existence. Moreover, the dukes were divided into different ranks according to their different rights. The Duke of Lu enjoyed the lowest tier of salary, a county-level salary. The Duke of Lu had inherited the title for 3 generations, and his existence had become extremely inconspicuous. Basically, no one in the royal court would pay attention to him unless there was something special going on. 4 towering walls stood tall, forming a circle. Surrounding the walls were tall and lush maple trees. Behind the high walls was a luxurious, tall and straight mansion. This was the Duke of Lu residence. In the dead of the night, the forest was silent, save for the occasional chirping of birds. In the darkness, the 2 rows of red lanterns hanging by the entrance of the Duke of Lu residence were exceptionally eye-catching. The eagle, are you sure that he will come tonight? In the forest, Wang Chong, who was hidden in the canopy, asked the eagle. The duo had been waiting here for quite some time now, but they didn't see anything. Gongzi, don't worry. I've observed him, and he comes around this time every day. He should be done scouting the area over the past few days, and it's about time for him to make a move. The eagle chuckled. Chio. Just as they were speaking, a chirping sound suddenly sounded above their heads. A small bird the size of a wicker basket leaped happily above their heads. It's here. Upon seeing this ordinary bird, the eagle's heart leaped in joy, and it suddenly chirped softly. Who? Almost at the same time, a gust of wind blew, and a masked figure suddenly appeared. It was the person whom the eagle spoke of. Chapter 287. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios. The tranquil night suddenly turned eerie with the appearance of the assassin. That person stood outside the high wall, looking very vigilant. He did not rush in, but stood outside the forest, slowly looking around. Wang Chong had seen his fair share of assassins. Be it Arab assassins, Gogurian assassins, or even Mayasame Ayaka, the female assassin from Ingzhou. None of them felt as bizarre as the assassin before him. He was simply too calm. It wasn't the calmness that came from a major event, but a calmness that stemmed from his very bones. No matter what he did, he would do it slowly and calmly. Even if a blade was pressed against his neck, he would still face death calmly. Wang Chong had only seen such disposition on a single person. I wonder if it's really him? A thought flashed across Wang Chong's mind, and he recalled a certain person on White Tiger Peak. Even though the eagle had been hinting that the other party was that person, he hadn't seen the other party's face yet, so he couldn't confirm it. Furthermore, there was a slight difference in his physique. It was hard to tell if the other party was a completely different person or if he had used some kind of movement technique to alter his movements. As the distance was too close, Wang Chong and the eagle didn't dare to get careless. They lowered their bodies and held their breaths, lowering their presence to the minimum. Wang Chong even used the tortoise breathing art to seal all of his pores so that not a single sound could be heard. Just as the duo was holding their breaths, an abrupt change occurred. An intense feeling of being watched rose in their hearts, and their hearts shuddered. This is bad. He has noticed us. Through the dense foliage, Wang Chong and the eagle noticed a pair of sharp eyes staring in their direction at the same time. That piercing gaze made the duo feel as though they were completely exposed. That fellow is way too wary. Wang Chong immediately felt that something was amiss. With tortoise breathing, even a profound martial realm expert would find it hard to notice him as long as he closed his pores. The eagle, on the other hand, was an expert close to the profound martial realm. He didn't expect to be discovered. Young master, wait. Suddenly, an arm reached out from behind. The eagle's expression was solemn as he grabbed Wang Chong from behind. His eyes clearly conveyed this message. Wang Chong was startled. Just as he was feeling astonished, he suddenly heard the crisp cry of a bird. Chirp chirp, chirp chirp. The sound was very close, jumping around, not far from the top of their heads. It was the little bird that the eagle kept. In a flash, Wang Chong understood what the eagle meant. The person was not looking at them, but at the little bird trained by the eagle above their heads. Chirp chirp, chirp chirp. The little bird seemed to be able to understand the eagle's intentions. After jumping between the branches a few times, it suddenly flapped its wings and soared into the sky. Soon, it disappeared into the night sky. Outside the high walls, the pair of eyes watched as the little bird disappeared into the night sky. Slowly, the gaze turned gentle. At the same time, the alertness in Wang Chong's heart also gradually disappeared. Impressive! Wang Chong looked at the direction where the little bird disappeared and praised in his heart. The eagle's ability to train birds was simply unparalleled. Regardless of the size of the bird, from giant eagles and condors to the common sparrows, pigeons, orioles, he could train all kinds of birds and make them work for him. This was also the reason why Wang Chong valued the eagle so much that he decided to hand over some of the Wang family's information channels to him. Among Steel Arms, Solitary Wolf, and the other two, he was the weakest. However, his ability to train birds was also the best. No matter how powerful an expert was, they would never imagine that those common birds by the roadside would be someone else's eyes and ears. So, on the other side, after confirming that the surroundings were safe, the black-clothed man leaped high into the air, and as agile as a monkey, he silently disappeared into the high walls of the Duke of Lu residence. Gongzi, should we follow him in? The eagle turned around and asked with a hushed voice. Of course. Are the preparations done on your side? Wang Chong turned around and smiled. Hee, this isn't my first day taming birds. Gongzi, don't worry, I have already prepared all of the birds in the Duke of Lu residence. No matter where he goes, we will be able to keep track of him. Old Eagle knew what he was asking and faintly smiled, a hint of pride on his face. It wasn't his first day taming birds, so naturally, he couldn't just train that little bird. Ever since he failed to investigate King Sojerim's case back then, and all of his methods were discovered by the Gogurians, he had endured the humiliation for the past decade and worked hard. His bird taming techniques were no longer the same as they were back then. Now, he was no longer limited to those common eagles and eagles that could fly high. Now, even the birds that were commonly seen in the bushes on the side of the road could be used by him to scout for information. Even the most formidable of experts wouldn't be able to think of such a possibility. So, the duo leaped down from the tree, and with a leap, they silently leaped onto the city walls in the direction where the black-clothed man had disappeared. Within the high walls, there were rows upon rows of pavilions, terraces, and pavilions. There were also gardens, ponds, and rockery, all of which were connected in the darkness. And in just a short moment, the black-clothed man had already disappeared. There! The eagle's eyes lit up. With a hushed voice, he suddenly pointed to a gazebo in the distance. Following the eagle's gaze, Wang Chong saw a blurry silhouette flashing by. If not for his sharp eyes, he wouldn't have noticed it at all. What in the world is that fellow doing? Wang Chong gazed into the distance in contemplation. That fellow didn't seem to have a specific target. Instead, he seemed to be searching for something. Gongzi, should we chase after him? The eagle glanced at the city walls and asked. Even though he didn't wield any actual authority, he was still a duke of the royal court. There were still quite a few guards in the residence, and there was a high chance that he would be discovered. On top of that, the masked lad was also extremely alert. It wouldn't be easy to follow him without being discovered. Standing on top of the wall, Wang Chong fell into deep thought. Let's go down and take a look. In any case, I must find out whether that person is him or not today. Also, why would he come to a duke's residence in the middle of the night? Wang Chong said. He had to get to the bottom of this matter before returning to the Kunwa training camp. This was the final matter he had to understand. As for the danger, he wasn't afraid even if he was discovered by the Duke of Lu. Let's go. Leaping down from the city walls, the duo discreetly headed in the direction of the masked man. At this moment, the birds that the eagle had reared played an important role. Even without following the masked man, the duo was able to keep track of his movements. That fellow is too daring. What is he looking for? The masked man's movements were erratic, sometimes to the east and sometimes to the west. As he tailed the masked man, even the eagle was astonished. After all, this was a duke's residence, and after many years of accumulation, there were still some formidable experts in it. Even the eagle and Wang Chong had to tread carefully here in case they were discovered by anyone from the Duke of Lu residence, needless to say, anyone else. But the masked man didn't have the slightest bit of apprehension. Based on his observations over the past few days, the masked man seemed to have a thorough understanding of this place. He knew when the guards would be changing shifts, where the guards would go, and where they would go. It was as if he was a member of the Duke of Lu residence. But the eagle knew that it was impossible for that to be the case. Along the way, he had seen the masked man entering and exiting the bathhouse, the drawing room, the guest room, the main hall, the garden. Other than the Duke of Lu's residence, which was heavily guarded, the masked man had entered almost everything else in the Duke of Lu residence. His footsteps were silent, and his expression was frighteningly calm. In the darkness of the night, he seemed no different from a specter, leaving one shivering in fear. All of a sudden, the eagle froze. His gaze was fixated on the area before him. What's wrong? Following beside the eagle, Wang Chong immediately noticed that something was amiss. Over there. He entered the residence of the son of the Duke of Lu. The eagle was taken aback. What? Wang Chong hadn't realized what was going on yet. That's the residence of the son of the Duke of Lu. The eagle stared ahead. Wang Chong's body trembled violently, and he abruptly turned his head around. In the darkness, through the arched roof, he could see a brightly lit room in the distance. Unlike the other areas of the Duke of Lu residence that had been plunged into darkness, this room was extremely eye-catching. Wang Chong finally understood the eagle's intentions. Most people dressed in black would try their best to avoid places with open flames. However, this person didn't seem to have such qualms. But this wasn't what Wang Chong was concerned about. Eagle, are you sure that that is the residence of the son of the Duke of Lu? Wang Chong asked grimly. The eagle nodded. Gongzi, do you want to take a look? Unexpectedly, the eagle thought that Wang Chong would agree with his suggestion. But contrary to his expectations, Wang Chong's face suddenly warped. Let's go. This is a trap. If we don't leave now, it'll be too late. What? The eagle was astonished. How could this be? The sparrows he had trained had been in the vicinity all this while, and they hadn't noticed any traps at all. Why would Wang Chong say that this was a trap? But Wang Chong didn't explain at all. After saying those words, he immediately leaped forward and dashed out. The eagle hesitated for a moment, but eventually he still decided to follow. The duo swiftly retraced their steps, leaped over the high walls, and left the Duke of Lu residence. Gongzi, what is going on? In the forest beyond the high walls, the eagle asked as soon as he landed on the ground. Eagle, things aren't that simple. I don't know if the men from the Duke of Lu residence have noticed you, but they have definitely noticed him. Regardless of what he is looking for or whether he is targeting the son of the Duke of Lu, he won't be able to get anything out of this trip. Wang Chong said grimly. His thoughts were too simplistic. The Duke of Lu had already fallen from grace, and he didn't even have the right to discuss politics in the royal court. Only during the Lantern Festival would he be invited to the royal palace to have a meal with the Scions. But how could a duke of the Tang dynasty be simple? Chapter 288. So, not too long after the duo left the Duke of Lu residence, a commotion could be heard from behind the walls. This sudden movement immediately attracted the attention of the two people. Gongzi, there's movement. That person has left the Duke of Lu residence. The eagle reported. As he spoke, the eagle couldn't help but glance at Wang Chong in astonishment. He knew that Wang Chong was right. Not bad. His reaction is indeed fast to realize that something is amiss so quickly. Hearing those words, a hint of surprise flashed across Wang Chong's eyes. He had just left the Duke of Lu residence, but he had already left the area. There weren't many people who could match up to his sharpness. Let's go and take a look. Without any hesitation, Wang Chong beckoned the eagle, and the two of them headed in the direction where the masked man had left. So, a cold gust of wind blew, and in the direction opposite of where Wang Chong and the others had entered the Duke of Lu residence, there was a flash of light, and a masked man leaped out from behind the walls. The masked man's hands were hidden within his sleeves, and he clenched them tightly. His face was pale, but he didn't say a single word. Only deep hatred could be seen in his eyes. Without a doubt, his operation had failed. So. After leaving the Duke of Lu residence, the black-clothed masked man swiftly dashed into the distance. Brat, are you still thinking of leaving? A cold sneer sounded, and a light flashed in the forest. A figure suddenly appeared from the side, blocking the path of the masked man. The masked man's face darkened, and just as he was about to turn around, another figure leaped out from the other side of the forest, blocking the masked man's path. I already told you to stay behind, so where do you think you're going? That muscular figure walked out from the ambush, but he wasn't in a hurry to attack. Instead, he slowly surrounded the masked man to prevent him from escaping. Even though the masked man was dressed in black and had a mask covering his face, the figures on both sides were sneering coldly, as if they had seen through his disguise. Aren't you going to speak? Do you think you can hide your identity by not speaking? The fierce-looking man in the lead laughed coldly and continued to press forward. Let me tell you, you might be able to hide your identity from others, but you won't be able to fool Gongzi and the old master. Kid, from the very beginning, Master knew that you would come here sooner or later. Hearing this, a slight change finally appeared in the masked man's eyes, but there was even more extreme coldness and hatred. If you were in the Kunwa training camp, we wouldn't be able to do anything to you. But it's a pity that you survivors refuse to give up and actually walk right into my trap. The burly man in the lead sneered. Buzz. Hearing the sturdy man's words, the masked man's complexion suddenly changed. His eyes were slightly red, and an extremely cold aura was released from his body. He was like the most ferocious beast, dangerous and terrifying. In the beginning, the leader of the group was still calm and unruffled, looking down from above like a cat toying with a mouse. But under the pressure of the masked man, he felt as though he had swallowed 100 flies, and he felt extremely uncomfortable. Brat, you still dare to look at me with such eyes? You really don't know what's good for you. Since that's the case, don't blame me for this. Brothers, come out. Whoosh, 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 like some kind of signal in an instant, the front, back, left, right of the black-clothed masked man. Like ghosts appearing out of thin air, they suddenly walked out of their hiding places with malicious intentions and surrounded the black-clothed masked man. Screech! Not far from the top of the forest, a clear and resonant cry came from a place not far above the forest. A cat-like adult eagle spread its iron wings and gently glided down from the sky. Right, I forgot to tell you. No matter which direction you flee in, you won't be able to escape. So, you should just give up. The leader of the group said coldly, as though he was looking at a prey trapped in a cage. He tore off a piece of jerky and tossed it over. The ferocious bird caught it, and with a sharp cry, it flapped its wings and quickly flew up, disappearing into the night sky. Watching the giant eagle disappear into the night sky, the black-clothed masked man suddenly understood something, but his cold eyes did not show any expression. Clang. Slowly taking a few steps back, the masked man in black pulled out a sword with a clang, showing his attitude with his actions. You're courting death. The leader of the group flew into a rage. He waved his hand, and an expert with a majestic aura leaped out with a sneer. My lord, there's no need for so many people to deal with this brat. Just let me do it. Before he finished speaking, he swung his sword. Boom! A majestic gust of stellar energy erupted from his body like a raging torrent. But something shocking happened. Almost at the same moment that the expert made his move, the masked man suddenly leaped forward, charging toward the expert instead of retreating. Boom! Right before everyone's eyes, a powerful surge of stellar energy suddenly burst forth from the masked man's body. Along with this surge of stellar energy was a dazzling black halo. Boom boom! Dust and pebbles flew in all directions, and shockwaves of energy shot into the surroundings. As though two ferocious beasts, the two stellar energy surges collided with one another in midair, and a strong gale whipped up, causing the surrounding trees to rustle noisily. Ugh! Before anyone could comprehend what was going on, a shrill scream of agony echoed in the air. The battle outside the forest came to an end in a short moment. The sword in the masked man's hand was knocked several zhang away. The expert from the Duke of Lu residence had pierced his right chest, and the tip of the sword was protruding from his back. On the other hand, the masked man's palms pierced deeply into the chest of the expert from the Duke of Lu residence. His eyes were as cold as ever. Deathly silence. The surroundings suddenly fell deathly silent. The gleeful expression on everyone's faces vanished, and in that instant, everyone felt a bone-chilling chill. For the first time, everyone felt a chilling power coming from this young man who had his head hidden and face masked with a black cloth and had not spoken a single word since the beginning. No one had ever seen such a ferocious fighting style before. Even at the cost of severe injuries, he was determined to kill his opponent. Even though the masked man was severely injured, everyone knew that he had lost. That was because he had paid the price with his life. Pucci. Outside the forest, the masked man calmly withdrew his hands, and the expert from the Duke of Lu residence collapsed to the ground as though a wooden pillar with his eyes wide open. The black masked man's attack had not only pierced his chest with his hands, but it had also crushed his heart in his chest. Kill him! Seeing this scene, the burly man in the lead had a ferocious look on his face as he suddenly pounced forward to kill. This time, it wasn't just one person. Everyone made a move. Gongzi, hurry. Their battle is getting more and more intense. The eagle said. Even though he couldn't see anything at all, he had many birds to relay news for him. Even though he wasn't present at the scene, he felt as though he was witnessing it with his own eyes. There are quite a few of them. Furthermore, they are moving swiftly toward the northwest. The target is injured. Another group of people is coming. Amidst the darkness, the eagle led the way and reported the situation to Wang Chong. Honestly speaking, even though he had seen the eagle train, he didn't understand a single word of the eagle's unique language. Occasionally, he would only see a small bird flying in front of him, jumping, chirping, circling, or flapping its wings. In Wang Chong's eyes, these were ordinary movements of birds, but in the eyes of the eagle, it was the rich language of birds. It was through this language that Wang Chong and the eagle were able to keep a clear target in their pursuit. There's another eagle. The eagle's footsteps suddenly paused. I was too careless. I didn't expect Duke of Lu to be prepared and even hide an eagle in his residence. Gongzi, you are probably right on this matter. This is indeed a trap. To think that Duke of Lu would know that someone would be coming. The eagle sneered coldly. He was an eagle. He had spent his entire life interacting with all kinds of birds. Before doing anything, he would first sweep the skies to see if there were any eyes and ears of others. This was a common practice on the battlefield, but the eagle still managed to do it. Thus, the eagle was certain that there wasn't such an eagle in the vicinity of the Duke of Lu residence before this incident. This eagle that suddenly appeared was from the Duke of Lu residence. To hide an eagle before the incident even happened, and then release it to chase after its prey. This matter was getting more and more bizarre. The eagle realized that this matter was completely different from what he had imagined. There's no need to hold him back. Kill that eagle. Wang Chong understood the meaning behind the eagle's words, and he said calmly, if the other party had an eagle in the sky, that person wouldn't be able to escape. On top of that, the other party had an eagle, and that person would be exposed. Also, send the signal. Wang Chong said. Yes, Gongzi. Old Eagle chuckled, a delighted expression on his face. Reaching his right hand into his left sleeve, Old Eagle took out a miniature golden bird. The bird's body was curled up, and its eyes were bright. The feathers on its body seemed as though they would shoot out at any moment. With a single look, it was clear that this wasn't an ordinary bird. Wang Chong had been in contact with the eagle for quite some time now, but he didn't know that the latter had such a bird on him. He felt that the eagle had many secrets. Yee! The golden bird suddenly opened its beak and let out a cry. The sound it produced was so loud that it was completely disproportionate to its size. With a leap, it flew out from the eagle's hand. Even Wang Chong didn't see how it disappeared. Chapter 289. There are bloodstains on the ground. There was a fight here. Outside the forest where the masked man fought, Wang Chong and the eagle came to a halt. There was a huge amount of blood on the ground, and there were signs of a fight everywhere. The ground was riddled with holes, and quite a few trees had been broken. Wood shavings were flying all over the place. Not only was there a fight, someone even died. There's too much blood here. This isn't a normal loss of blood. The eagle stood up and glanced at the clear human-shaped mark on the ground a few steps away. This wasn't a normal situation. It was caused by human blood splattering on the ground. Judging from the amount of blood loss, even if the other party wasn't dead, he was probably on the verge of death. They have already dragged the corpse away. Wang Chong nodded in agreement with the eagle's judgment. The men from the Duke of Lu residence seemed to be intending to conceal this matter, so they dragged the corpse away as soon as possible. However, due to the lack of time and the fact that they had to chase after the other party, they didn't have the time to clean up the bloodstains and signs of a fight. Suddenly, a glint flashed across Wang Chong's eyes, and he leaped to the edge of the forest. He squatted down, and when he stood up once more, there was a black cloth in his hand. It belongs to that lad. The eagle also walked over, and upon seeing the blood seeping out of the cloth, his eyes were filled with worry. That lad is vomiting blood. It seems like his injuries aren't light. He was on the verge of developing feelings for the fellow who snuck into the Duke of Lu residence in the middle of the night. Not to mention, the Gongzi had instructed him to investigate the other party. Even though he wasn't sure why the Gongzi wanted him to investigate the other party, the eagle could sense that the other party was a friend and not a foe. Wang Chong didn't say a word. Holding the blood-soaked cloth in his hand, he fell into deep thought. Let's go. Tossing aside the black cloth that reeked of blood, Wang Chong immediately dashed forward. He was getting more and more curious about the relationship between that fellow and the Duke of Lu residence. That fellow left the Kunwa training camp and came to the Duke of Lu residence in the middle of the night. For several days, he seemed to be searching for something. Just what in the world would belong to the Duke of Lu residence? There was also Duke of Lu. His attitude toward that person was completely unlike that of a thief who had infiltrated his residence in the middle of the night. He seemed to have known about the man's plan before he made his move. He had prepared a trap in advance, a giant eagle hibernating in the mansion, and a team of experts who would follow his orders at any time and would pursue him to the death. If there was no ulterior motive, was there a need to treat a nameless person like this? With these thoughts in his mind, Wang Chong sped up and rushed forward. The birds that the eagle was watching were constantly sending back news. The situation ahead was getting more and more serious. Although his impression of that guy was not easy to deal with, the fact that he was able to break through the encirclement and run all the way to that place was enough to prove his strength. He would not be able to hold on for much longer. Don't let him escape. If he escapes, I'll hold you responsible. Catch him. From afar, a flustered and exasperated voice sounded amidst the deafening explosions. Judging from the voice, there were quite a few people gathered ahead. Wang Chong's heart tightened, and he and the eagle hastened forward. Through the dense forest, Wang Chong immediately saw several brawny men brimming with killing intent. Even though most of these people weren't dressed in the uniform of the Duke of Lu residence, it was clear that they were martial arts experts recruited by the Duke of Lu residence. Surrounded by this group of people, a pale-faced young man was slumped to the ground. Blood was flowing from his lips, and his clothes were completely drenched. Usually, it was difficult to discern the color of blood on a black nocturnal outfit, but at this moment, even Wang Chong could tell that it was viscous fresh blood. His body was riddled with sword wounds and saber wounds. It wasn't as simple as a cut from a sword. Many of the wounds had penetrated through the body, from the front to the back. In some places, even the bones were exposed. The injuries were so severe that an ordinary person wouldn't have been able to withstand it and would have fainted from the pain. But that person didn't. He sat on the ground with a calm expression, so calm that it was frightening. It was impossible for anyone to do what he did. But he was truly capable of doing so. In fact, Wang Chong couldn't even sense the slightest hint of emotion from him. His calmness left one despairing or perhaps callousness. Amidst the forest, a group of men didn't notice the arrival of Wang Chong and the eagle. At this moment, the brawny man was completely focused on the young man before him, and he was infuriated. He had already intercepted the young man outside the high walls of the Duke of Lu residence, but he didn't expect the young man to charge out of the encirclement and even kill quite a few of his men. This infuriated him to the core. Go. Kill him. Kill him. I will reward whoever kills this lad, that the brawny man bellowed. Even though the experts of the Duke of Lu residence were seething with killing intent, none of them dared to step forward. The brawny man was taken aback for a moment before he recovered from his shock. In an instant he flew into a rage. Go! 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 You bastards! That lad is already at the end of his rope. What are you all afraid of? The brawny man kicked and cursed, but the surrounding men had awkward expressions on their faces. They hurriedly dodged, but no one dared to step forward. Everyone knew that the lad was severely injured, and he wouldn't be able to hold on for much longer. This included the brothers who had already fallen to the ground. But more importantly, every time that lad seemed to be on the verge of death, he would be as lively as a dragon and a tiger when they stepped forward to attack him. He would fight with his life on the line, killing one brother after another. It wasn't that no one had ever seen someone with the nickname Desperate Swordsman before. But there had never been anyone like him. This wasn't just a simple case of him being ferocious, but one that didn't fear death at all. There was no such thing as feigning civility when fighting with him. From the very start, he would fight with his life on the line, knowing that it was either life or death. Every time that lad seemed to be at the end of his rope, he would risk his life to be pierced through, and his internal organs would be blasted before killing his opponent in a single blow. Furthermore, he would stab his hands into the other party's body and kill them in such a chilling manner. At this point in the battle, everyone already understood that his sharpest weapon was not his saber or sword, but his pair of fists. On top of that, those brothers who thought that he was on the verge of death were all lying on the ground. Under such circumstances, no one dared to dissuade him. Bastard! The brawny man flew into a rage. Swoosh! He drew the saber by his waist and was just about to make a move when he suddenly heard a loud shout. Gongzi is here! Gongzi is here! In an instant, everyone felt as though they had received a decree. Under the starry night sky, A silhouette dressed in a long white robe with a gloomy face could be seen. He was accompanied by a few experts who had obviously surpassed the true martial realm and was flying over. Even from a distance away, everyone could feel the powerful aura of nobility emanating from that person. He was the heir of the Duke of Lu residence, Li Bing. Move aside. With a livid face, Li Bing leaped down from the treetop. Voila! In an instant, everyone opened up a path for the heir of the Duke of Lu residence. Behind him, two experts with profound gazes and unfathomable cultivation also flew down and stuck close to him. Under the tree, the pale-faced young man looked like a piece of paper. When he saw the two experts of the Xianqi layer behind Li Bing, his expression finally fluctuated and his eyes dimmed. The eldest son of the Duke of Lu residence, Li Bing, was in his 20s. He had a well-built body, and he seemed to possess a domineering aura. As soon as he appeared, the people around him naturally followed his lead. Su Hanshan, I don't care how smart you think you are. Since you have changed your name, I'll call you that for the time being. Li Bing said coldly, revealing the name of the young man. The black-clothed and masked man who had barged into the Duke of Lu residence in the middle of the night was no other than Su Hanshan, who shared the same room with Wang Chong on White Tiger Peak in the Kunwa training camp. If you had just obediently stayed in the Kunwa training camp to be your Su Hanshan, I wouldn't have bothered with you. However, since you dared to barge into my Duke of Lu residence, don't blame me for what happens next. Beneath the tree, Su Hanshan sat on the ground silently as he stared coldly at the eldest son of the Duke of Lu, Li Bing. Retribution comes in the cycle of the heavens. Li Bing, one day, you and your Duke of Lu residence will pay the price for what you did back then. Su Hanshan suddenly said. After saying those words, he immediately regained his composure and closed his eyes silently, awaiting death. You're courting death. Those words completely infuriated Li Bing. Since you're so eager to die, I'll fulfill your wish. Kill him. 1. As soon as Li Bing finished his words, the profound martial realm expert behind Li Bing suddenly stretched out his hand and grabbed at Su Hanshan, who was standing under the tree. Under the starry night, his 5 fingers emanated a cold glint reminiscent of swords. Stop! At this crucial moment, a voice suddenly echoed from the forest, attracting everyone's attention except for the profound martial realm expert behind Li Bing. Panglong. At the crucial moment, a figure dashed into the battlefield like a tiger in a flock of sheep. At the moment of imminent peril, he stood in front of Su Hanshan and blocked this sure-kill move. Who is it? The faces of the two profound martial realm experts turned cold as they turned their gazes over. Who is it? At the same time, Li Bing's gaze also turned to the forest. At this moment, there shouldn't be anyone else here. Brother Su, are you all right? Wang Chong walked out from the forest and glanced at Su Hanshan, who seemed to have died once, with an awful complexion. Even though he had tried to stop Su Hanshan, it was futile against the experts around Li Bing. If not for the eagle, Su Hanshan probably wouldn't have been able to save Su Hanshan. Who in the world are you? What relationship do you have with that fellow? Staring at Wang Chong, Li Bing's complexion was even more awful than Wang Chong's. The fellow lying on the ground was of great importance. The Duke of Lu residence had spent a long time waiting for him to walk right into their trap and capture him. In fact, he had even led a team here personally. This matter couldn't be allowed to go wrong. In fact, he couldn't allow anyone else to see it. This person was completely out of his expectations. Chapter 290. Li Gongzi, it has been a long time. I am Wang Chong, the grandson of Prime Minister Wang Bowu and the son of General Wang Yan. Wang Chong observed his expression and said nothing more. With a wave of his hand, he tossed over a dazzling golden token. Taken aback, Li Bing subconsciously caught it. However, with just a glance, his face immediately warped. Li Bing had never met Wang Chong before, and their social circle didn't intersect at all. However, there was no one in the capital who didn't know of the Wang clan's emblem. Wang Bo. No one dared to address him in such a manner anymore. Everyone, including the dukes and kings of the royal court, had to address him respectfully as Duke Jiao. Li Bing didn't expect that the young man who suddenly walked out of the forest in the middle of the night would be the grandson of Duke Jiao, the Wang clan's Qilin son who had caused a huge uproar in the Tang dynasty. Why is he here? Li Bing looked at the calm-looking young man who was walking toward him with a hint of fear in his eyes. Even though the Wang clan wasn't conferred the title of duke, it was the clan of ministers and generals envied by the other clans. In terms of standing, it wasn't beneath the Duke of Lu residence. Brother Su, how is it? Are you able to hold on? Ignoring the complicated expression on Li Bing's face, Wang Chong revealed his identity and walked through the crowd toward Su Hanshan, who was seated beneath the tree. The person he was most concerned about at the moment was Su Hanshan. This talented general who could rival the likes of Gao Xianji, Fomin Linta, Geshu Han, and Wang Shogui was the person that Wang Chong was most concerned about at the moment. The future seemed to have taken a turn for the worse. In his previous life, Su Hanshan's personality was cold, aloof, and unsociable. Even though he trained the best army in the world and was able to pierce through the defenses of the other party, he was also known for his unsociable personality. In his previous life, Su Hanshan's personality was cold, aloof, and unsociable. Needless to say, he didn't have much of a relationship with his comrades from the Kunwa training camp, needless to say, others. There was no one who could be his ally, and he would never work with anyone. Yet, such a person would always leave the army at a specific time every year and appear at a certain location in the capital. Even when the war was at its peak, it had never changed. Wang Chong had asked the Eagle to investigate based on this point. Just that, Wang Chong didn't expect that his investigation would lead him to the Duke of Lu, and for such a scene to occur. If he hadn't appeared, wouldn't Su Hanshan have died here? This was something Wang Chong hadn't expected at all. Wang Chong realized that things were starting to change from what he remembered. Brother Su, this is a healing pill. It might be of some help to your injuries. Wang Chong walked to the bottom of the tree and took out a healing pill that he got from Liu Zhizhang and handed it over. Su Hanshan's face was still as cold as ever. He did not accept the healing pill that Wang Chong was offering him, maintaining his aloof demeanor. Just that, when his cold eyes glanced at Wang Chong's figure, he couldn't help but reveal an indiscernible hint of astonishment. Without a doubt, Su Hanshan didn't expect Wang Chong to appear here, not to mention at this moment. As expected, nothing has changed at all. Wang Chong chuckled inwardly. He wasn't surprised in the least. Even though the two of them shared the same room on White Tiger Peak, they had their own matters to attend to, and they didn't have much of a relationship with one another. Su Hanshan's daily routine wasn't too different from that of an ordinary person. He would disappear early in the morning before daybreak, and he would return late at night. Even though they lived together, the chances of them meeting each other were pitifully low. Under such circumstances, given Su Hanshan's personality, it would be strange if he would accept Wang Chong's offer for free. Li Gongzi, I'll take this person away. How about I owe you a favor? Wang Chong looked back at Li Bing and said confidently. Both the Wang clan and the Li clan were nobles in the capital. Since Wang Chong had already revealed his identity, it was equivalent to the Wang clan dealing with the Duke of Lu residence. Once the scions of the prestigious clans came of age, they would represent their clan. Thus, they wouldn't make promises easily. Wang Chong believed that a promise from him was more important than Su Hanshan's life. Li Bing wouldn't reject him. Chong Gongzi, pardon me for speaking out of turn. This person. Su Hanshan isn't from the capital, so he probably doesn't have much of a relationship with Gongzi. Chong Gongzi, why don't you hand this person over to us? My father has already instructed us to bring him back no matter what. I hope that Gongzi can fulfill my wish. Unexpectedly, Li Bing hesitated for a moment before saying something else. Even under such circumstances, he was still unwilling to give up on Su Hanshan. Wang Chong's eyebrows shot up. Amidst his surprise, he couldn't help but glance at the pale-faced Su Hanshan on the floor. A person whom the Duke of Lu had personally instructed to capture? This wasn't the attitude one would use against a petty thief. What kind of conflict did this fellow have with the Duke of Lu? Li Gongzi, you're overthinking things. This friend of mine has always been like this. To be honest with Li Gongzi, Brother Su and I shared the same room on the White Tiger Peak of the Kunwa training camp. This time, he had come down the mountain on the orders of his ancestor to invite him to stay at the Wang family and meet him. However, I didn't see him for a long time, so I came over to take a look. I didn't expect such a thing to happen. Li Gongzi, on my account, I hope that you can let this matter rest. I'll surely pay you a visit in the future to apologize. Wang Chong's reaction wasn't slow. Since Li Bing brought up Duke of Lu, Wang Chong brought up his grandfather and even said that his grandfather would be inviting him over. Wang Chong didn't believe that Li Bing would be able to overturn this. Bullshit. Do you know how many of our men this lad has killed? Those brothers of ours are still lying on the floor right now, and you think that you can just take them away just like that? A guard of the Duke of Lu residence suddenly interjected and reprimanded. Wang Chong narrowed his eyes, and a cold glint flashed across his eyes. Times were different now. He was no longer the idle profligate son of the past. In the outside world, he represented the Wang clan, a clan of ministers and generals. How could a young master of a clan of generals and ministers speak with the son of a duke of the Tang dynasty? However, Wang Chong couldn't be bothered to reprimand the guard. This matter only meant that the Duke of Lu residence had lost face. Instead, he turned his gaze to the eldest son of Duke of Lu, Li Bing. Back down. Do you have the right to speak here? As expected, under Wang Chong's glare, Li Bing couldn't maintain his composure and bellowed furiously. With an embarrassed look, the latter hurriedly retreated. Chong Gongzi, must you take this person away? Li Bing took a few steps forward and said in a deep voice. His eyes stared fixedly at Wang Chong, not letting go of the slightest change. What guest invited by Duke Jiao? He didn't believe a single word that Wang Chong said. However, there was no doubt that Wang Chong was here for this lad. What Li Bing wanted to know at this moment was whether there was any room for reconciliation between the two parties. Was Wang Chong determined to take this lad away? The Wang clan wasn't an ordinary clan. If it was anything else, he would have agreed to it. However, this matter wasn't an ordinary one to the Li clan. Li Gongzi, I think that I have made myself clear. I must take this person away. Wang Chong pointed to Su Hanshan and said, the reason why he appeared here in the middle of the night wasn't to allow Li Bing to bring Su Hanshan into the Duke of Lu residence. Regardless of the relationship between the Duke of Lu residence and Su Hanshan, he was determined to bring Su Hanshan away. Chong Gongzi, you don't seem to have many people with you, right? Li Bing sneered coldly as he stepped forward. As he spoke, he stared coldly at the eagle behind Wang Chong. His intentions were clear. There was only one profound martial realm expert by Wang Chong's side. And there were two such experts by Wang Chong's side. If Wang Chong were to make a move, Wang Chong wouldn't be able to escape at all, needless to say, save Wang Chong. Ha! Wang Chong couldn't help but laugh at these words, his expression fearless. Li Gongzi, you can't be that naive. This is the Duke of Lu residence, and I'm alone. Do you think that I would come here without any preparations? Hearing those words, Li Bing couldn't hold himself back anymore. If Wang Chong really had an expert hidden in the shadows, he wouldn't be able to bring this person away regardless of whether he was willing or not. At the very least, if anything were to happen to Wang Chong here, the Duke of Lu residence would definitely be in deep trouble. The Wang clan wasn't just any ordinary clan. Putting aside Duke Jiao's influence in the royal court, just the alliance between the Wang clan and the King of Song was something that all powers had to take seriously. The current Wang clan and the King of Song were at the peak of their power in the royal court. The Bureau of Military Personnel, the royal court, and the royal court were all vassals to them. In this aspect, the Duke of Lu residence, which had been around for 3 generations, couldn't possibly compare to them. Putting everything aside, just the wrath of the King of Song wasn't something that the Duke of Lu residence could withstand. If what Wang Chong said was true, the Duke of Lu residence would have to reconsider its actions. Brotherly, do you doubt my words? Wang Chong's eyes were as sharp as the flames of a candle. Seeing that Li Bing wasn't willing to speak up, he immediately knew what the latter was thinking. With a slight smile, he raised his arm and gestured. So, an arrow pierced into the ground before Li Bing. The shaft of the arrow was almost at his feet, and the tail of the arrow trembled in the air, producing a buzzing sound. Looking at the arrow, Li Bing's heart immediately sank, and his complexion turned awful. He didn't expect Wang Chong to be telling the truth. The other party had really come prepared. This arrow was more than enough to prove his point. However, he couldn't bring himself to let Su Hanshan off just like that. In order to lure this lad into their trap, the Duke of Lu residence had spent a huge amount of time and effort. How could they possibly let him off so easily? More importantly, wouldn't that matter be exposed? How could Li Bing be willing to accept this? He wasn't sure whether he should make a move or not. In this instant, Li Bing and his group of experts were caught in a dilemma. Voila! Just as Li Bing was in a dilemma, the sound of wind whistling echoed. A snow-white West Domain eagle flapped its wings and flew over from the night sky. This sudden change immediately caught everyone's attention. Even Wang Chong turned his gaze over. The West Domain eagle clearly belonged to the Duke of Lu residence. Li Bing stretched out an arm, and the West Domain eagle landed on his left arm. Chapter 291. After reading the letter in his hand, Li Bing heaved a long sigh of relief, and his expression relaxed. Chonggongzi, my father wishes for me to ask you a question. If I allow you to take him away, you will not be able to do so. If I let you take him away, can you guarantee that not a single word of today's matter will leak out? Li Bing held the letter in his hand, but his gaze was fixed on Wang Chong. To think that it would be Duke of Lu. Wang Chong was surprised as well. But thinking about it, it was impossible for the Duke of Lu to ignore the Duke of Lu residence's schemes to capture Su Hanshan. Don't worry. I know how I should know. You can tell the Duke that he can treat today's matter as though nothing has happened. There won't be any news that will be detrimental to the Duke of Lu residence spreading out from the Wang clan. Wang Chong said seriously. His goal was only to save Su Hanshan. Everything else wasn't within his scope of concern. You can take this lad away now. Also, Chonggongzi, I hope that you will remember what you just said. Retreat. Li Bing nodded and waved his hand. Without saying a word, he turned around and led the group of people away. Even Wang Chong was dumbfounded by how clean and efficient it was. In just a few moments, nearly 20 people had disappeared without a trace. Even the corpses on the ground had been dragged away. This Duke of Lu sure is decisive. Brother Su. Brother Su? Brother Su? Not good, the eagle, hurry up and support him. As soon as Wang Chong turned around, he saw Su Hanshan's body slumping to the ground behind the tree. With Li Bing gone and the danger averted, the taut string in Su Hanshan's heart loosened, and he couldn't hold on any longer. Wang Chong fed Su Hanshan a pill before instructing the eagle to carry him back to the Wang clan. Su Hanshan's external injuries looked very serious, but his internal injuries were even more serious than his external injuries. His entire body relaxed, and his body began to bleed profusely. Under normal circumstances, there was no hope for him to recover from such severe injuries. Wang Chong had to feed him 3 imperial life-saving pills that he had bought from Liu Zhizhang. Each pill cost 100,000 taels of gold, and only then was his life saved. After his injuries had stabilized, Su Hanshan's body strangely began to emit a powerful aura of life, causing his recovery rate to be much faster than that of an ordinary person. Roughly 3 days later, Su Hanshan groaned and finally woke up. You're awake. Looking at Su Hanshan on the bed, Wang Chong revealed a smile. This guy had finally woken up. If he died like this, Wang Chong really didn't know what to do. This was a future imperial great general. People of this level could be counted on one hand in the entire Central Plains. If he died just like that, it would definitely be a huge loss to the Tang dynasty. This vitality is really ridiculous. Wang Chong thought to himself as he looked at Su Hanshan. He had found an expert to examine his body and found that there were more than 30 saber wounds on his body, 17 of which had pierced through his chest and lungs. And of these 17, 11 of them were so severe that his life was in danger. This kind of injury would be a ghastly sight even to those who saw it. Putting aside recuperating, it would already be a miracle if he didn't die. But Su Hanshan had managed to survive. Not only that, in just 3 days, his body had recovered from a state that could have killed him several times over to a state of ordinary heavy injuries, and it was still recovering at an astonishing rate. Putting aside this life, Wang Chong hadn't seen many people with this sort of vitality even in his last life. It wasn't without reason that this fellow was able to become one of the most dazzling generals of the Kunwa training camp. There were definitely many secrets hidden on his body. "Where is this?" Su Hanshan asked. Propping himself up from the bed, his expression was calm, devoid of the panic and unease that an ordinary person would have. The first thing Su Hanshan said after he woke up was to observe his surroundings calmly. "In my home. This is the guest's room." Wang Chong smiled. "Thank you." Su Hanshan nodded. These were the last words he said. Even though it was just 2 words, given Wang Chong's understanding, this was already his limit. Given Su Hanshan's cold and aloof personality, it wasn't easy for him to say the word, "thank you," to someone else. In both lifetimes, Wang Chong was probably the only person he had ever said those 2 words to. After saying those words, Su Hanshan sat down on the bed and closed his eyes to cultivate, not moving an inch. His face was pale and his body was still extremely weak. It seemed like he was still far from a full recovery. "You should rest first. If there's anything you need, inform me at any time." Wang Chong shook his head. He had already experienced Su Hanshan's personality. Without saying anything else, he closed the door and walked out. Gongzi, bad news. Su Gongzi has left by himself despite the obstruction. Less than 2 hours after Wang Chong left, the maid who was attending to him rushed in. "How long has it been?" Wang Chong was taken aback. "It's been around half a tea's time. We haven't been able to stop him." The maid's eyes reddened, and she was on the verge of tears. As she spoke, she pointed a finger outside. Wang Chong deeply creased his brow. He knew that Su Hanshan would leave sooner or later, but he didn't expect it to be so soon. Su Hanshan only stayed for 2 hours before leaving. Even though Su Hanshan's condition was much better, he was still far from being able to walk on his own. Furthermore, he was severely injured at the moment, so it would be troublesome if he were to be targeted by the Duke of Lu residents. However, Su Hanshan's personality had always been like this. If he was someone who would compromise so easily, he wouldn't have suffered such a fate in his previous life. Even though half a tea's time wasn't too long, it was more than enough for him to walk out of the Wang family residence. The capital was bustling with people, and once he stepped onto the streets, it would be impossible to find him. This is really in line with his personality. He doesn't like to owe others anything at all. Wang Chong shook his head as he sighed. "Forget it, this matter has nothing to do with you. Let him be." Wang Chong waved his hands casually. Even if the Duke of Lu wanted to deal with Su Hanshan, since the other party had let him go that night, the Duke of Lu residents probably wouldn't do anything to him anymore. Even though Su Hanshan was severely injured, he wasn't in any danger at the moment. "Right, Gongzi, that Su Gongzi left a note behind." The maid from the Wang clan suddenly thought of something and hurriedly took out a piece of paper from her sleeve. Seeing her clumsy actions, Wang Chong couldn't help but chuckle inside. "You are called Xiao Mei, right?" Wang Chong suddenly asked. "Yes. Gongzi, you remember me?" The maid was astonished. She had only been in the residence for 3 months, and she was afraid of being punished for her wrongdoings. She didn't expect that Gongzi would remember her and even know her name. It would be weird if he didn't. Wang Chong chuckled inwardly. In his previous life, it was Xiao Mei who brought him much joy in the final moments of his life. It was a pity that she ended up in that kind of scene. "Xiao Mei, you will follow me from now on." Wang Chong said. "Go Gongzi. This isn't good, right?" Xiao Mei's face reddened in embarrassment. "What are you thinking about?" Wang Chong was amused by this fellow's wild thoughts. He felt both angry and amused at the same time. This fellow was still as clumsy as ever. As expected of the Mei lass in his memories. "I mean, you will be transferred over to serve me in the future. Help me pour tea and fold the blankets." Wang Chong said. "Ah, so that's the case?" Xiao Mei understood, and her ears reddened. However, she soon forgot all about it and began cheering. Gongzi, I'm willing, I'm willing. Seeing the innocent and happy look on the young lady's face, Wang Chong felt the troubles in his heart lessen significantly. After sending the young lady away, Wang Chong opened the slip of paper left behind by Su Hanshan. I owe you a favor. It was a cold sentence written with a brush. The tip of the brush was forked, and it exuded a ferocious aura. With a single look, it was clear that this was Su Hanshan's handwriting. Heh, it's as expected. Wang Chong smiled as he crumpled the paper in his hand into a ball. Su Hanshan had a proud and aloof appearance, cold and unapproachable. With a single look, one could tell that he wasn't an easy person to deal with. However, he was still filled with gratitude in the depths of his heart. It was just that he wasn't good with words. Otherwise, he wouldn't have left this note behind. In the other world that Wang Chong came from, there was a term for this type of person, social disorder. Su Hanshan clearly belonged to this type of person. If I help someone, I'll help them to the end. Since I know that you're in trouble, I'll help you to the end. Wang Chong glanced at the wall of the courtyard before walking away with a smile. There was a saying, the gaze speaks volumes. Back in the room, Su Hanshan's gaze had already been on the verge of pleading with Wang Chong, but due to his reclusive personality, he was too ashamed to voice it out. After leaving the garden, Wang Chong summoned the eagle. Are there any clues? In the lounge, Wang Chong sat on an expensive sandalwood chair, picked up a cup of tea, and took a sip. 3 days ago, when he rescued Su Hanshan, Wang Chong had already arranged for the eagle to investigate this matter. Something that was worth Su Hanshan risking his life to infiltrate the Duke of Lu residence couldn't be a small matter. Something that was worth the Duke of Lu offending the Wang clan and the King of Song just to kill him couldn't be a small matter. Su Hanshan wouldn't speak of it, that wasn't his personality. Thus, Wang Chong could only search for the answer himself. Perhaps, if he were to find the answer and solve the riddle, he might be able to help Su Hanshan undo the shackles that bound him, allowing him to achieve what he was unable to do in his previous life. He would become a true imperial great general of the Central Plains who could stand on his own and rule over a region. Gongzi, I've looked into the matter over the past few days. Even though the Duke of Lu has concealed the matter well, I was still able to vaguely find out something from the mouths of the servants in the Duke of Lu residence. There's a young lady in the Duke of Lu residence, and she's being watched over strictly. Her meals and drinks are always sent over, and no one is allowed to get close to her. Also, around 3 to 4 months ago, the young lady suddenly moved out for no apparent reason. After that incident, the servants in the residence said that Su Hanshan's infiltration of the Duke of Lu residence was probably for that young lady. The eagle said grimly, 3 to 4 months ago? Isn't that the opening of the Kunwa training camp and the day Su Hanshan entered White Tiger Peak? Wang Chong creased his brow in thought. However, Gongzi, I have a feeling that this news isn't as simple as it seems. The eagle lowered his head in contemplation. What do you mean? I feel that this news was intentionally released by the Duke of Lu residence. As there wasn't much investigation done, it was easily obtained. However, as for the appearance of the young lady, her background, and her relationship with Su Hanshan, there wasn't any other crucial information. According to the rules of the trade, this can be considered as an opening. What do you mean? Wang Chong asked in astonishment. The reason why the Duke of Lu residence is willing to speak of this matter is to put an end to it. However, we're still lacking a suitable middleman. Let's sit down and discuss this matter. The eagle said. Wang Chong immediately understood the other party's intentions. Even though he had saved Su Hanshan that day, this matter wasn't over just like that. Thus, the Duke of Lu residence intentionally released some information. However, the Duke of Lu residence couldn't possibly reveal this information to a spy lurking outside. Thus, the Duke of Lu residence released some information, but not too much. On top of that, the Duke of Lu residence wasn't willing to reveal this information to Wang Chong directly, as that would be beneath him. Thus, he needed a special middleman of high standing. The Duke of Lu would tell him, and through him, Wang Chong would tell Wang Chong. Even though it sounded complicated, This was the daily routine of the upper echelons of society. Wang Chong was born in this circle, so he naturally understood this as well. Speaking of which, the Duke of Lu residence is still wary of the authority and prestige of grandfather and the King of Song. Wang Chong observed. Chapter 292. Fatty Wei, hurry up and make a trip down the mountain. A pigeon soared into the sky from the Wang family residence, heading toward the Kunwu training camp. This was the only message on the pigeon. At the end of the message, a tri-dot ink mark was added on the letter. This was the signal that Wang Chong and Wei Hao had agreed upon. There was no better middleman than Wei Hao. As a Duke of the Tang dynasty, Wei Hao's background wasn't inferior to Duke of Lu's. In fact, he might even be superior. Sending Wei Hao out would allow the Duke of Lu residence to retain some face. Furthermore, they were both scions of prestigious clans, and they were no longer the profligate scions of the past. It was about time for Wei Hao to do the things that scions of prestigious clans should do. Coming. The reply from Kunwu training camp soon arrived. On the letter were two large words written in flamboyant calligraphy, or rather, incomparably ugly. Wei Hao's calligraphy was as ugly as Wang Chong's. By the time the pigeon arrived, Wei Hao was already on his way. He didn't ask why, nor did he make any excuses. Wei Hao had complete trust in Wang Chong. As long as he called out to him, he would come over immediately. This was what brothers were like. Wang Chong, you were looking for me? It was nearing evening, and Wei Hao entered the Wang family residence. Without even wiping off the sweat on his forehead, he headed straight for Wang Chong's study. How is it? Brother, I'm here quickly. I saw the mark on the letter. It's extremely urgent, so I didn't rush over immediately. Wei Hao stood at the door with his hands on the doorframe. He grinned excitedly. He knew that Wang Chong had left the mountain. They were brothers, and it wasn't the first day that he had known Wang Chong. Wei Hao was willing to bet that something must have happened in the capital. Otherwise, Wang Chong wouldn't have called for him. It's not that urgent, but there's something important. Wang Chong smiled. Ever since he was young, whether it was his past life or this life, he had always liked this kind of personality. He wouldn't say anything even if he had to risk his life. Do you still remember Su Han's Han from White Tiger Peak? The one who shares a room with me. Wang Chong went straight to the point and told him everything he knew about Su Han's Han. Is that him? Wei Hao stepped into the room and took a sip of water. His face was also filled with surprise. In the capital, Duke of Lu has always kept a low profile. How did Su Han's Han get involved with Duke of Lu? He knew about the block of ice on White Tiger Peak. They were not to be trifled with and were not easy to deal with. Many people avoided him when they saw him. Wei Hao didn't expect Wang Chong to look for him. That's exactly what I want to know. This is also the main reason why I called you here. Help me arrange an appointment with the second son of the Duke of Lu. I want to know what is going on here. Wang Chong said, All right, leave this matter to me. It just so happens that my clan has some dealings with the Duke of Lu. I'll help you find out more about it. Without any hesitation, Wei Hao stood up and left. Wei Hao left in the evening, and Wang Chong thought that he would return soon. However, he didn't expect that Wei Hao would still be nowhere to be seen. Wang Chong sent someone to investigate, and all he heard was that Wei Hao had made an appointment with the young master of the Li clan to reserve the entire tavern. No one was allowed to enter, and no one was allowed to leave. Gongzi, should we send someone to take a look? Isn't this a little too long for a meeting? In the study, the eagle stood before Wang Chong and asked. There's no need for that. This is the territory of the Son of Heaven, and Wei Hao is the son of Duke of Wei. The Duke of Lu won't do anything to him. Seated behind his desk, Wang Chong waved his hands and said authoritatively, Don't use a person you doubt, and don't doubt a person you use. This matter involved the great clans of 3 empires, and Wang Chong believed that the Duke of Lu wouldn't dare to do such a thing. Just wait patiently. He will come out sooner or later. After saying these words, Wang Chong closed his eyes. Time slowly passed, and 4 hours later, a commotion suddenly sounded outside. Before the person could even be seen, a loud exclamation sounded. Wang Chong, Inconceivable, inconceivable. Do you know what I just heard? Accompanied by the eagle, Wei Hao hurried into Wang Chang's study. His eyes were bright, and even in the darkness, they glowed brightly. After returning from the Kunwa training camp and chatting with the son of Duke of Lu late into the night, not only did Wei Hao not feel fatigued, he even seemed energetic. Did the son of Duke of Lu say anything? Wang Chong suddenly felt energized, and his sleepiness was swept away. Raising a finger, he gestured to the empty seat opposite him, indicating for Wei Hao to sit down. Wang Chong, I finally know what Su Han is looking for in the Duke of Lu residence. He's looking for his younger sister. Can you imagine? That fellow actually has a younger sister. Wei Hao exclaimed in astonishment. Wang Chong and the eagle glanced at each other, and both of them were astonished. Wei Gongzi, you can't be thinking of saying that the Duke of Lu residence forcefully abducted a lady and oppressed the kind-hearted. That Li Bing of the Duke of Lu clan fell in love with that Su Gongzi's younger sister and forcefully abducted her into the residence, right? Yet, the Duke of Lu residence tried to kill that Su Gongzi out of fear that this scandal would spread? The eagle asked in bewilderment. Even though he was the one who brought Wei Hao into the residence, due to the lack of time, he didn't have the time to understand the situation. It would be great if it's really a show where the scions of nobility abduct a lady. Things are 100 times more complicated than that. Wei Hao chuckled as he crossed his legs, intentionally keeping Wang Chong in suspense. Isn't that the case? Wang Chong said, ignoring the gleeful look on that lad's face that was asking for a beating. You don't know, right? You might be scared to death if I tell you. Do you know that the real Duke of Lu should be that Su Han? Wei Hao gleefully tossed out an earth-shattering piece of news. How is that possible? Wang Chong widened his eyes in shock. He knew of the grudge between Su Han and the Duke of Lu residence, but Wei Hao's words were truly a miraculous twist. This was especially so considering that it was coming from the Duke of Lu residence, which made it even more unbelievable. Wang Chang's instinctive reaction was disbelief. Wei Hao, what's going on? Tell me the details of your meeting with Duke of Lu Gongzi. Don't keep me in suspense. Wang Chong straightened his back and said earnestly. He felt that he had probably come into contact with Su Hanshan's true secret. If he could unravel this secret, he might be able to open up Su Hanshan's path to becoming a great general. He would be able to bring out all of his potential and allow him to reach heights that he couldn't reach in his previous life. It's a long story. That fellow from the Duke of Lu residence was so hesitant, and he refused to say anything. He thought that Su Han had said something to you, so he ended up spilling the beans himself. Seeing the seriousness in Wang Chang's words, Wei Hao didn't dare to continue keeping him in suspense. Thus, he revealed everything that he had heard in the tavern. The grudge between the Duke of Lu residence and Su Hanshan's lineage could be traced back to 3 generations ago, when the Tang dynasty was under Emperor Gaozong. Even though the Duke of Lu residence and Su Hanshan's lineage hated each other so much, 3 generations ago, the two were best friends. Su Han wasn't an outsider either. He was a citizen of the capital. Emperor Gaozong's generation was a rare talent. His martial arts couldn't be said to be weak, but he was definitely not an extraordinary figure. Furthermore, he couldn't be compared to the current Holy Emperor. Given Emperor Gaozong's talent, it was easy to imagine the dangers he faced before he ascended to the throne. Once, Gaozong fell into danger and fainted. It was Su Hanshan's ancestor, Su Feng, who discovered him in time, saved him, and brought him out of danger. Su Feng didn't tell anyone about this matter, other than his only friend. That was the ancestor of the Duke of Lu residence. Gaozong was one of the few emperors of the Tang dynasty. He was indebted to another for saving his life, so he wanted to confer him the title of Duke. However, in his days, Gaozong mistook Su Feng's friend for the person who saved him. On top of that, Su Feng's friend was blinded by greed. Even though he knew that His Majesty was mistaken, under the allure of the title of Duke, he still accepted the matter. On the other hand, Su Hanshan's grandfather, Su Feng, was kept in the dark. By the time he found out, the matter was already settled. On the other hand, Su Feng's friend was afraid that the matter would be exposed, so he imprisoned Su Feng. The latter had always viewed the other party as a close friend, and he felt deeply humiliated by the other party. Although Su Feng's friend finally felt guilty and let him out, Su Feng's friend still let him out. However, Su Feng still died of grief and indignation. This was the origin of the grudge between Su Hanshan's lineage and the Duke of Lu residence. An eye for an eye, an eye for an eye. How could Su Feng, as a son, tolerate the humiliation and indignation that he suffered? Even though a lawsuit was filed and the matter was brought up to the royal court, the emperor's words were golden. But after all, the emperor's words were like gold and jade. Even if he had recognized the wrong person, he could only make the best of the mistake. Even though Su Feng's son was rewarded, there was no way he would accept it. Just like that, this matter became a deadlock. As such, there was no room for reconciliation between the two clans. After Su Feng's son failed in his mission, he fled the capital. Thus, he passed his will down to his son, Su Hanshan. This was already the third generation. The Su clan passed his will down to his son, never forgetting to seek vengeance. On the other hand, Duke of Lu's lineage didn't sit idly by either. They passed down the matter as well. Even though they were in the wrong, they couldn't just sit idly by and allow others to place a knife against their neck. The Duke of Lu residence also did something as well. Somehow, they managed to find the hiding place of Su Hanshan and his brother, and they dispatched a group of men to capture Su Hanshan's younger sister. As for Su Hanshan, no one knew what he was doing back then. In any case, he wasn't on the mountain, so he managed to escape this calamity. The Duke of Lu residence didn't do anything to his younger sister after capturing her. She still stayed there with good food and drinks, and she was also provided with special maids to serve her. Other than the fact that she couldn't move freely, it was much better than living in the mountains. On top of that, no one in the Duke of Lu residence harbored any ill intentions toward her. The Duke of Lu residence's thoughts were simple as well. Since the grudge between the two clans couldn't be resolved, they would use his younger sister as a hostage. This way, Su Hanshan would have some reservations, and he would be able to prevent himself from doing something as extreme as the previous generation. However, the Su clan and the Duke of Lu residence weren't just enemies. In fact, the Duke of Lu residence's standing was due to Su Feng. The ancestor of the Duke of Lu residence had also explained these matters in detail in his family letter. Thus, there was no need for them to do anything to the young lady. They were still extremely polite, not offending her at all. Chapter 293. To think that the truth would be like this. It's no wonder why Su Hanshan seemed to have a knot in his heart in his previous life, causing him to be unable to become an imperial great general and become the greatest loss of the Central Plains. Hearing Wei Hao's words, Wang Chong fell into a long period of silence. Those seniors from back then had many opinions about Su Hanshan. Without a doubt, his fall was a heart-wrenching one. This person was capable, daring, and decisive. Even those who disliked him had to admit that Su Hanshan was an outstanding commander. Wherever he stood, even if the enemy had 1,000 men, the army by his side would never back down. As long as Su Hanshan wasn't afraid, as long as Su Hanshan was still standing there, his soldiers would never fear him. In that chaotic world, to his empress, Su Hanshan had always been the safest person in the world. He advanced and retreated together with all of his soldiers. And in the end, Su Hanshan fulfilled his promise to his soldiers. He and his most powerful army had perished together on the battlefield. This was a man worthy of respect, a true soldier, a great general of the empire. Even though he didn't manage to reach that step in the end. Back then, when Wang Chong heard of Su Hanshan's death, his heart was also filled with sorrow. This was also the reason why Wang Chong was determined to help Su Hanshan in this life. Of all the people in the Kunwa training camp, Su Hanshan was the one Wang Chong wanted to help the most, the one who wanted to change his fate the most. However, this wasn't something that outsiders could talk about. Wang Chong couldn't possibly talk about it to outsiders. The Duke of Lu's lineage sure knows how to talk. I don't believe that the truth is as they say. My clan does have some dealings with the Duke of Lu residence. But despite being in the capital for so long, I still don't know how the Li clan obtained their position as Duke of Lu. How shameful! Wei Hao said disdainfully as he leaned back. He valued his brothers and friends the most. Therefore, as soon as Wang Chong sent him a letter and a sentence, he directly left the Kunwa training camp without asking why. After rushing for several hours, without any hesitation, he immediately helped Wang Chong arrange an appointment with the young master of the Duke of Lu clan. Now that he was exhausted, there was not a single word of complaint. With Wei Hao's personality, he hated people who betrayed and coveted their brothers. The truth is hard for us outsiders to say. It's normal that you haven't heard about it. After all, this matter involved Emperor Gaozong. It's not the kind of thing that goes around. However, this matter also explains why the Duke of Lu residence is keeping such a low profile. Wang Chong's index finger tapped on the table. There were many dukes in the Tang dynasty. Most of them chose to keep a low profile after the death of their ancestors, staying away from politics to protect themselves. Even so, the Duke of Lu residence was one of the more discreet dukes who preferred to protect themselves. In fact, the Duke of Lu residence even planted a circle of trees outside the high walls. Very few people in the capital were aware of the existence of the Duke of Lu residence. Now that he thought about it, there must be a reason behind it. Not many people in the lower echelons knew that the nobility of the Duke of Lu's lineage was a dishonorable title. However, the royal court should have known about it. It was just that no one mentioned it out of fear of Emperor Gaozong. The Duke of Lu lineage also knew about it, which was why they chose to keep such a low profile. Even though I don't agree with the Duke of Lu lineage, their words aren't without reason. The grudge between the two clans is a matter of their grandfather's generation, and the people involved are already dead. Their generation is already the third generation, so it has nothing to do with the matter back then. Furthermore, even though Su Hanshan's grandfather passed away in anger, his father accompanied them in passing. This is different from ordinary vendettas. Wang Chong said. But Su Hanshan probably won't think so. Wei Hao said. But compared to that matter, I believe that there's something else that he's more concerned about. Furthermore, we will soon know whether the Duke of Lu lineage is speaking the truth or not, whether they are just feigning civility, and whether they are truly intent on changing for the better. Bring me a brush. Wang Chong rolled up his sleeves, and with a flick of his wrist, he subconsciously reached for a brush. But after a moment of hesitation, he smiled bitterly and drew it back. The eagle, how's your handwriting? Wang Chong suddenly turned to look at the eagle and asked. The latter exclaimed, as though he had just awoken from a dream. Then, a perplexed look appeared on his face. Our handwriting is ugly, so Wang Chong asked you to write for him. Wei Hao said. Is that so? Because I often had to transcribe messages in the past, I practiced my handwriting for a period of time, so it's still passable. The eagle didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This young master of his was good at everything, and he had his own views on everything he did. However, this handwriting of his was extremely ugly, and it was truly incomprehensible. Duke Jiao was a virtuous minister of the Tang dynasty. Naturally, Wang Chong knew what the eagle was thinking. He was also embarrassed about this matter, so he hurriedly chuckled and changed the topic. After taking an inkstone and grinding the ink, Wang Chong explained the contents of the letter while the eagle wrote it down. Finally, he stamped the Wang clan's seal on the letter, and a guard of the Wang clan sent it to the Duke of Lu residence. This was the official way for the clans to communicate with one another, and carrier pigeons were forbidden. On the other hand, with the Wang clan's seal on the letter, regardless of whether the letter was written by Wang Chong or not, the Duke of Lu would be representing the entire Wang clan. Wang Chong's letter was simple, and there was only a single content. In the name of the Wang clan, he hoped that the Duke of Lu residence would hand over Su Hanshan's younger sister, the girl whom the Duke of Lu residence had kidnapped, to the Wang clan. Regardless of whether the Duke of Lu residence's words were true or not, they would know once they saw the girl. If the girl was indeed mistreated, there was nothing Wang Chong could do about it. The grudge between Su Hanshan and the Duke of Lu residence was irreconcilable. Even though the current Su Hanshan looked like a joke, the future Su Hanshan would definitely be able to make the Duke of Lu residence weep. If the girl was still a virgin and had been treated well, it would mean that the Duke of Lu residence wasn't lying, and there was still a chance that the matter could be resolved. Roughly a day after the letter was sent out, a lady was sent out from the Duke of Lu residence. Wang Chong didn't meet the lady because she was sent to the Kunwa training camp by the guards of the Duke of Lu residence. Along with the lady were 2 chests of gold and a letter. The gold was left behind, but the letter was taken away. After the lady appeared outside the Kunwa training camp, she vanished into thin air. No one knew where she went. Alright, this matter is finally resolved. It seems like the Duke of Lu's men weren't lying. They didn't mistreat that lady. Wang Chong stood up and stretched his back lazily. The goodwill of the Duke of Lu residence wasn't without a bottom line. He had used the name of the King of Song and the Wang clan to help Su Hanshan get the girl back, so it was only right for him to express some goodwill. Help me make an appointment with the eldest son of the Duke of Lu, Li Bing. Wang Chong said. His big brother wasn't around, and his second brother was in the imperial prison. At this moment, he was the eldest son of the Wang clan. After this matter, Wang Chong specially made an appointment with the eldest son of the Duke of Lu, Li Bing, at his royal jade pavilion to express his gratitude. Just like that, this matter came to an end. Gongzi, I still don't understand. That day at the Duke of Lu residence, even my eagles weren't able to tell that it was a trap. Gongzi, how did you know? When everything was over, standing in the courtyard of the Wang family residence, looking at the flower beds and ponds before the corridor, the eagle couldn't help but voice the doubts in his heart. That day, if they had advanced any further, they would have been discovered. The world beyond and beyond the high walls were 2 completely different worlds. If Wang Chong had been trapped within the high walls, even if he were to die, the Duke of Lu residence could claim that nothing had happened. After all, why would the grandson of Duke Jiao appear in the Duke of Lu residence? If the Wang clan didn't explain this matter clearly, they wouldn't be able to explain themselves. Yet, before the duo could get close, Wang Chong had already noticed the danger and dodged the attack. The eagle, the eagles, and sparrows that you have trained are already very intelligent. However, there are some things that the eyes of a bird can't see. Wang Chong smiled. That incident happened a few days ago, and the eagle was still brooding over it. Clearly, he was still very concerned about it. However, the eagle didn't know that there was another reason why he was able to see through the trap. The Tang dynasty has a history of more than 200 years, and there are many Saiyans in the capital. No one knows all of them. But if you hang around here often, you'll more or less hear about them, or have heard some things about them, or have even caught a glimpse of them. Wang Chong explained. Those from the Duke of Lu residence are considered to be rather low profile. The Saiyans of their clan rarely interact with others, but in certain aspects, they are rather high profile. But in some ways, they're quite high profile. Whether it's the eldest son, Li Bing, or the second son, Li Nian, who Wei Hao went to meet, or young master, they all bring a lot of guards with them when they travel. On top of that, the guards around them are completely different from the guards around Saiyans like us. They are true experts that the Duke of Lu found from the sections. It feels as though they are always on guard against something, so no one really interacts with them. Wang Chong said. The eagle nodded. He recalled the 2 formidable profound martial realm experts by Li Bing's side that day in the forest. Li Bing brought these experts with him, and they almost never left his side. He even brought them with him when he met Gongzi. Back then, when Wei Hao met with the second son of Duke of Lu, Li Nian, he was the same. In this aspect, the rumors weren't wrong. But of course, the people in the capital probably didn't expect that the rumors weren't wrong at all. The members of the Duke of Lu clan were guarding against others. They were guarding against Su Hanshan. You said that the room of the Duke of Lu Gongzi was brightly lit that day, but there wasn't a single guard outside. People like them who bring profound martial realm experts with them when they travel, how could they not even leave a single guard at the door? Since you have already confirmed that it was the room of the Duke of Lu Gongzi, there can only be one possibility. That is, it was a trap. Thinking about it, Su Hanshan had been searching the Duke of Lu residence for several days straight, but he didn't seem to be in a place where there was no one around. Thus, there's no doubt about it. In truth, he was also astonished that day. But after confirming that it was the room of the Duke of Lu Gongzi, Wang Chong immediately retreated without any hesitation. These weren't things that the eagles and sparrows could see through. From this point of view, it could be said that his experience as a playboy in the capital was not completely useless. After saying those words to the eagle, Wang Chong flung his sleeves and walked out of the corridor. At the entrance of the Wang family residence, a carriage was waiting for him. "Let's go," Wang Chong said to the coachman who had been waiting for a long time before stepping into the carriage. Now that the matter in the capital had come to an end, it was about time for him to return to the Kunwood training camp. Chapter 294. The mountains in the vicinity of Kunwood training camp were steep and treacherous. At the edge of the training camp, on a path that one had to pass through, a slender figure stood alone. His clothes fluttered in the wind, and he exuded a cold and lonely aura. From afar, he looked like an iceberg, standing there motionlessly, as though waiting for something. "Brother Su." This was the first scene that Wang Chong saw when he arrived at the foot of the mountain. Su Hanshan stood there, seemingly waiting for a very long time already. "Thank you." Standing at the edge of the cliff, Su Hanshan's eyes flickered. Ignoring Wang Chong's greeting, he spoke 3 words. "How is your sister?" Wang Chong was taken aback. Then he understood that Su Hanshan was here for his sister. He couldn't help but smile. Su Hanshan's personality was probably unchangeable. No matter who he was in front of, he would always be so distant. But even so, Wang Chong realized that every time Su Hanshan saw him, he could sense that his complexion was much more relaxed. "I owe you a favor, and I owe you a life," Su Hanshan said seriously. "If you have any requests, feel free to tell me. Be it a mountain of blades or a sea of fire, even if it means my life, I will do it for you." This was the longest sentence that Su Hanshan had spoken to Wang Chong in the past 3 to 4 months. Su Hanshan seemed to have prepared this sentence for a long time. As the saying goes, a gentleman keeps his word. Su Hanshan didn't owe anyone favors, nor did he make promises easily. But if he made a promise, he would do it even if it meant his death. Su Hanshan had clearly thought for a long time before coming to this decision. Su Hanshan never wanted to owe anyone anything. But he couldn't reject the help he was receiving from others. He could ignore himself, but he couldn't ignore his sister. She was his only kin in this world. "It's not as serious as you say." Wang Chong was taken aback for a moment before he smiled. Su Hanshan seemed to have been conflicted for a long time. He was probably thinking too much. He really didn't have anything to ask of him. However, if there was really a request, Wang Chong did have one. "However, if you really want to repay me, you only need to promise me one thing. To the west of Longxi, there's a place called Chicken Crowing Mountain. Promise me, no matter what happens, you can't go near that place." Ridiculous. Su Hanshan was stunned for a moment before he flung his sleeves and left. He never made promises easily, but Wang Chong's request obviously meant nothing to him. Since Wang Chong didn't want to say it, he couldn't force him. Su Hanshan soon disappeared in the direction of the main peak of the Kunwood training camp. As Wang Chong watched his back slowly disappear into the distance, the smile on his lips slowly disappeared and a trace of gloominess flashed across his eyes. It was impossible for Su Hanshan to know that he was being serious. Wang Chong naturally couldn't tell him that this chicken crowing mountain that he had never heard of would be the place where he would die in battle. That place was still called Chicken Crowing Mountain now, but in the future, it would be known as the Great General Mountain. Of all the battlefields in the Central Plains, there weren't many that were more famous than that small mountain. Su Hanshan was the final great general of the Tang dynasty. Exhaling deeply, Wang Chong tossed aside the distracting thoughts in his mind and walked forward. The Kunwood training camp was bustling with activity. It had been more than 10 days since Wang Chong left, and the atmosphere seemed even livelier. Examinees were lined up in a row, shooting at their targets on the archery field. They were even equipped with armor for the battlefield. Some of the examinees even blindfolded one of their eyes to practice how to shoot arrows in the event that their only eye was injured. There were at least 30 to 40 times the number of examinees in the archery field, and most of them were fighting in pairs. Some of them were even fighting 1 against 2, 3, or even 5 at the same time. From the looks of it, they were extremely skilled. There were also clear differences in the weapons they were wielding. Bamboo sabers and bamboo swords, wooden sabers and wooden swords, blunt sabers and bronze sabers, as well as the sharpened weapons. The more realistic the weapon was, the more dangerous the training would be. It has only been 3 to 4 months since the opening of the training camp, and it's already starting to show its true form. Wang Chong thought as he walked through the bustling training camp. At the very start, the Kunwa training camp was just a mountain. But now, it was starting to show its true form. After traversing through half of the training camp, Wang Chong didn't return to his residence. Instead, he turned around and walked past the White Tiger Peak, heading in another direction. He was almost done with his preparations in the Kunwa training camp. Now, it was time for him to move on to the next step. Gongzi! Halfway up the mountain, a group of people had been waiting for a long time. Their expressions were rather respectful. They were Zhao Jingdian, Zhuang Jingping, Qi Weisi, Chen Burang, Sun Jiming, Gao Feng, Nye Yan, Su Qi, and the others. They had already received news of Wang Chong's arrival through pigeons, and they were already waiting here. Everyone had a solemn expression on their faces. The atmosphere was much more solemn than usual as well. They had noticed Wang Chong's residence from the very first day of construction. Even though Wang Chong didn't say it explicitly, everyone knew that Wang Chong was about to start building his own faction in the Kunwa training camp. From then on, everyone here would be on the same boat as Wang Chong. Birds of a feather flock together. When a person was born, there would be the saying that they were of the same clan. Everyone shared the same ancestor, and this was the saying that they were of the same clan. And when one was slightly older, there would be schoolmates. If they studied under the same window and were taught by the same teacher, they would be considered classmates. And when one left home, there would be the saying that they were from the same clan. Since everyone was from the same place, they would take care of one another. This was the saying that they were from the same clan. And when they were successful in their career, they would be conferred a title and work in the royal court. This was the saying that they were from the same clan. Everyone had their own group. Only when there was a group would there be protection. This was how most of the scions of the prestigious clans came to be. Zhuang Jingping and Qi Weisi had been influenced by their surroundings since young, so they couldn't be more familiar with this. The two of them had wanted to persuade Wang Chong, but fortunately, Wang Chong had decided to act on his own. Are you ready? Wang Chong turned to look at Zhao Jingdian. He didn't bring Jingdian with him when he left the mountain, so he arranged for him to stay here. Zhao Jingdian was his comrade and subordinate in his previous life. Naturally, it was time for him to familiarize himself with such matters. Everything is ready. Lieutenant Li has been here a few times before, and he even sent guards to guard the place. All of the renovations have been completed. Let's wait for NZ to make arrangements. Zhao Jingdian said. Wang Chong nodded. He knew that the Lieutenant Li whom Zhao Jingdian was referring to was his uncle, Li Lin. Li Lin was the one who had been making the arrangements for him on this mountain. After greeting the crowd, Wang Chong led the way to the peak of the mountain. Sunlight shone down, and from afar, a resplendent residence could be seen standing on the peak of the mountain. The sun shone down, illuminating all the roof tiles with a golden luster. It was a beautiful sight to behold. After 4 months of construction and renovation, Wang Chong's residence by the lakeside of White Tiger Peak was finally completed. The eaves and arches of the residence exuded a sense of grandeur and luxury. It's finally done. Wang Chong heaved a sigh of relief as he looked at the residence that resembled a fairyland. Food had to be eaten bite by bite, and a journey had to be taken one step at a time. Ever since he entered the Kunwa training camp, he could finally start on his plans. Not far to the east, the Kunwa training camp housed the most talented generals in the entire empire. Every single one of them was a valuable asset to the empire. Every single one of them could be used by him. With his talent as a commander and these talented generals, he would be able to prop up the entire empire. This was where his dreams lay, and it was also the cornerstone for him to change his destiny. As the saying goes, a building 100 feet high is built from the earth. In the future, everyone would remember this place. Gongzi! As they reached the peak of the mountain, a few guards came forward to welcome them. It had been some time since the construction of the residence was completed. However, this was the first time Wang Chong had been here. Wang Chong led the crowd through the purple gate and into the tall walls of the residence. This was a completely different world. Gardens, ponds, corridors, rockeries, pavilions. There were even sculptures made by top-notch craftsmen. All of the eaves, doors, windows, and pillars were carved with exquisite craftsmanship. The materials used to paint the walls were also top-notch, giving off a grand impression. TSK, this pillar isn't simple. I remember seeing it before. It costs 700 gold taels each, and I think it's made of gold-threaded Jinan wood. The flying clouds on the eaves are flying in the air. I remember that they cost 50 taels of silver each. This is really beautiful. This place is much better than our training camp. My gosh, I don't think I can afford even a single pillar here. Other than Zhao Jingdian, Zhuang Jingping, and Qi Weisi, the others had just received the news and rushed over. This was their first time here. The interior of Wang Chong's residence was even more beautiful than the exterior. Su Qi, Gao Feng, Nye Yan, and the others were all descendants of officials. Even though they came from well-to-do families, they were still far from being able to afford such items. Even though they knew that Wang Chong was wealthy, this was the first time they were witnessing the extent of his wealth. Regardless of whether it was the wood for the pavilions or the ponds in the garden, they were all made of precious gold-threaded Jinan wood, red sandalwood, and white jade. However, the crux of the matter was that it wasn't just a simple stacking. Even though the materials were expensive, the design was elegant and ancient. Placed in the depths of the mountain, it seemed elegant and tranquil. Everyone fell in love with this place at first glance. Wang Chong chuckled. Seeing how everyone was attracted by the interior as soon as they entered the walls, touching and admiring everything, he couldn't help but chuckle. He didn't participate in the construction of this place at all. However, he was the one who provided the blueprints for the construction. Other than the ordinary flying eaves and arches of this era, there were also many unique features that Wang Chong had incorporated into the other era. But at the same time, the two of them fused together perfectly. For example, the wisteria chairs were woven with finger-thick wisteria, making them comfortable to the touch and sit on. These items were unique, and they blended in perfectly with the environment here. Chapter 295. As Wang Chong's first base in the Kunwa training camp, Wang Chong was extremely important to him. Thus, the renovations were extremely meticulous. And the results showed that it was indeed effective. Is everything prepared? While everyone was looking around, Wang Chong turned to look at the guard by the side. He vaguely recalled that this person was called Huang Liang, and Uncle Li Lin had mentioned him before. Everything here was under this person's control, and he was an extremely reliable person. Gongzi, everything is prepared. Huang Liang replied with a deep and respectful voice. Lead the way. Wang Chong nodded. At the entrance of the main hall of the residence, several 6G long pieces of paper were laid out, and a paper laminator was standing respectfully by the side. Beside the paper was a bowl-sized ink pot. When Wang Chong walked up to the entrance, he immediately caught everyone's attention. Zhao Jingdian, Zhuang Jingping, Qi Weisi, Su Qi, Gao Feng, Nye Yan, Chen Burang, and Chen Zhiming walked over. Their gazes were gathered on Wang Chong, and there was a faint hint of expectation in their eyes. Bring me a brush, Wang Chong said as he stretched out his hand. Gongzi! A guard immediately passed the brush over to Wang Chong. The atmosphere suddenly turned solemn. All of the construction had been completed, and the interior decorations had been completed as well. According to the rules, as the owner of this residence, he should name it after the construction was completed. But everyone knew that there was more to it than that. Wang Chong gripped the heavy brush, a pensive look on his face. Ever since his reincarnation, this was the first time he had stepped out and presented himself and the Wang clan to the world. This residence and this space would be of great significance to him in the future. Dipping the brush several times larger than an ordinary brush into the bowl-sized ink pot, Wang Chong already knew what he should do. Strategizing the world. Protect the common people through martial arts. 2 sentences of 14 words were eloquent. Wang Chong's righteousness was unflattering. However, Wang Chong's cursive script was a different story. As the saying goes, the brush moves like a serpent. The most important thing about cursive writing was the emotions contained in the writer, while calligraphy was secondary. These 2 lines of words contained Wang Chong's life's revenge. Although it was not the work of a master, it had a majestic aura. As a general, one must know the art of war and not know strategy. The Kunwa training camp was a general training camp, not a training camp for soldiers. As a general, the most important thing was to stop the war and suppress the world. In the future, this place would be called Deflecting Blade Manor. This is the true essence of martial arts. As Wang Chong spoke, his brush moved like a serpent as he wrote the last horizontal line. When these words were written, a majestic aura gushed out from the paper. Stop the war, stop the war. He did not manage to do it in his previous life, and this was his deepest regret. That was why he came back from the dead. Glory, riches, favor, loss. In this life, he no longer cared about these things. No matter what price he had to pay, he had to accomplish this goal. Because this was his mission. In that instant, Wang Chong felt agitated, and a majestic aura gushed out from his body. It wasn't the aura of this 15-year-old boy, but the war god of the Central Plains, the final grand marshal of the Central Plains, who had gone through countless trials and tribulations in his previous life. In that instant, the entire Deflecting Blade Manor fell silent. Looking at the words on the paper and the majestic aura emanating from Wang Chong, everyone in the courtyard was dazed. Even the Imperial Army guard's face paled. The aura emanating from Wang Chong was simply too powerful. In his previous life, he was the war god of the Central Plains, a figure whom even the foreign cavalrymen feared. How could these ordinary Imperial Army guards possibly bear such an aura? All of the guards, including Zhao Jingdian, Zhuang Jingping, Qi Weisi, Sun Jiming, and Chen Burang, were deeply intimidated, and none of them could say a word. No one knew what had happened to Wang Chong. But that unparalleled might, the majestic aura, and the aura he exuded were deeply imprinted in everyone's mind. Yet, that intimidating aura only lasted for an instant before disappearing without a trace. Wang Chong retracted the aura he exuded from his previous life, and just like a massive iceberg, he sank back to the bottom of the lake after revealing a corner of his true self. This wasn't the time for him to reveal his other self. Wang Chong soon reverted back to his original appearance. "Old mister, I'll have to trouble you to frame it for me," Wang Chong said to the old mister whom he had invited over from the capital. "Yes, Gongzi." The old mister glanced at the 2 poems on the table, and a hint of admiration flashed across his eyes. Then he respectfully took the 2 poems from Wang Chong and began to frame them. Behind him, the crowd also seemed to have awoken from a dream. Deflecting Blade Manor. Deflecting Blade Manor. What a good name. It's very poetic, and it suits the mood of this place. To think that Gongzi's poem would be so good as well. Everyone quickly recovered from their daze. Clearly, they were very fond of this name. It's good that everyone likes it. Stopping war through martial arts is the way to bring peace to the world. The goal of us, the students of Kunwa Training Camp, is to stop war and protect the world. In the future, feel free to visit us whenever you have the time. Wang Chong smiled as he turned to the crowd behind him. "Yes, Gongzi." The crowd replied respectfully. Unknowingly, they had already formed a group that viewed Wang Chong as their leader. Be it in terms of strength, standing, reputation, or background, Wang Chong was the undisputed number 1. And Wang Chong had already proven himself through his actions. "Jingdian, this is the first batch of names that I've drafted. Help me distribute them. Soldiers are valued for their quality, not quantity. 7 people should be enough for the first batch." Wang Chong passed over a list of names that he had prepared in advance. There were 100 generals in Kunwa training camp, but Wang Chong didn't intend to invite all of them. Rice had to be eaten bite by bite. First, Wang Chong wanted to invite the most influential people to join Deflecting Blade Manor. Once Deflecting Blade Manor's influence in Kunwa training camp grew, there would be an endless stream of people trying to join Deflecting Blade Manor. When that time came, Wang Chong could send out invitations to these people, and everything would fall into place. Gongzi, will the art of war be taught here? A voice came from the side. Sun Jiming was standing in the crowd, looking fervently at Wang Chong with a fiery gaze. He remembered that Wang Chong had mentioned the art of war. Martial arts was a minor Dao, but the art of war was the major Dao. It was something that only the clans of generals could grasp. And it wasn't taught in Kunwa training camp. He had looked into it over the past few months. There was no doubt about it. Wang Chong nodded. He wasn't surprised at Sun Jiming's reaction. This was a natural talent for generals, and in his previous life, he was the one who loved to launch surprise attacks and ambush. Sun Jiming's instincts had awakened. As a general, one must know the art of war. Those who wish to enter Deflecting Blade Manor in the future will have to pass the most basic examination on the art of war. Wang Chong said, the art of war in this world was truly crude. At the very least, that was how Wang Chong saw it. There was another reason why Wang Chong was conducting the examination on the art of war in Deflecting Blade Manor. He hoped to use his proficiency as the war saint of the Central Plains to temper and nurture the future generals of the Central Plains. If these future generals could pass his examination, they would become even stronger than they were in his previous life. And to the Tang dynasty, this would be a blessing in disguise. As the last Grand Marshal of the Central Plains in his previous life, Wang Chong had used tens of thousands of soldiers to hold back an enemy that was 10 times his size, allowing the Central Plains to survive for several decades and wipe out a large number of foreign invaders. In terms of the art of war, there was no one in this era who could surpass him. Even the legendary war god of the Tang dynasty, So Yongsan, had lost to him, needless to say, others. Art of war? Lad, you sure talk big. Just as Wang Chong said those words, a voice suddenly sounded from outside, and it was swiftly approaching. In the blink of an eye, several figures appeared at the entrance. Instructor Zhao. Instructor Zhou. At the gate of the Deflecting Blade Manor, 2 muscular and valiant figures walked in, one in front and one behind, their heads held high. Even Wang Chong was surprised to see them. To think that they would be Zhao Qianqiu and Zhou Huang. The former was the teacher of Wang Chong and Zhao Jingdian in the training camp, while the latter had a life-and-death comrade with them on the night of the Gogrian assault. Instructors, why are you here? Surprised, Wang Chong hurried forward to welcome them. Haha, I've always wanted to see who would be so daring as to set his sights on the Kunwa training camp and build a private residence so close to it. And now, it's indeed you. Zhao Qianqiu laughed heartily. Zhou Huang hurriedly walked forward and greeted the crowd. You're really a cunning fellow. The royal court is currently clearing up the surrounding land. I heard that the Bureau of Works and the Court of Judicial Review have issued a joint decree that all land within 10 li of the training camp is strictly prohibited and no private residences are to be built. I heard that the royal court has already sold the rights to this mountain to you. I couldn't even take it back even if I wanted to. Zhou Huang reprimanded jokingly. That lad has always been this fast, don't you know that? In my opinion, the rule from the Bureau of Works and the Court of Judicial Review is aimed at that lad. Those bastards from the Court of Judicial Review didn't even take a look when they were approving the land. They only realized it after making such a huge loophole. Zhao Qianqiu said, Lords, you already know that this is my private residence. Is it really appropriate for you to say such words in front of me? Wang Chong chuckled. As such, as soon as Kunwa training camp opened, Zhang Xian immediately bought the land here. Given the current situation, it was within his expectations that the royal court would ban the sale of land in the vicinity. It's best if I say it in front of you. There's no need to stand on ceremony with that lad. Zhao Qianqiu reprimanded jokingly. Casually pulling a purple rattan chair over, Zhao Qianxiu couldn't help but praise it for its comfort. Lad, you said that you're conducting a military strategy examination here. You sure are arrogant. Let me ask you, do you know the art of war? Zhao Qianxiu sat down on the rattan chair and lightly knocked on the table before him as he asked. Lord, are you going to guide me? Wang Chong chuckled as he sat opposite Zhao Qianxiu. Hee, it seems like you aren't convinced. It's fine for you kids to spar with one another. As for the art of war, don't lead them astray. This isn't something that can be taught casually. Come. If you can defeat me, you can teach them the art of war here. Zhao Qianxiu said. Even though his words sounded like a joke, Wang Chong could sense a hint of seriousness in Zhao Qianxiu's words. Clearly, Zhao Qianxiu didn't approve of him teaching the art of war here. The art of war was the way of a general. The slightest mistake could result in death. Not only would he be harming himself, his subordinates would also die a graveless death. This was also the reason why the Kunwa training camp didn't teach the art of war. Chapter 296. Since Lord is willing to give me pointers, I'll gladly accept it. Wang Chong faintly smiled. Deflecting Blade Manor had already prepared a game of Go, which Wang Chong had intended to use to test others. But now, he decided to use it against Wang Chong and Zhao Qianxiu. Haha, instructor is going to play chess with Wang Chong. I wonder which of the two is stronger. Even though I would like to say Gongzi, instructor should be stronger. Upon hearing that Wang Chong was going to compete with Zhao Qianxiu in the art of war, the crowd immediately became excited. This was especially so for Zhao Jingdian, Zhuang Jingping, Qi Weisi, and the others. Zhao Qianxiu was their direct instructor. On their first day on the mountain, Zhao Jingdian's unique ferocious tiger teachings had made them suffer quite a bit. Gongzi, you can do it. Teach the instructor a lesson. Zhuang Jingping and Qi Weisi mustered their courage and cheered. If it had been any other time, they wouldn't have dared to do so. The two of them knew that instructor Zhao had a powerful background. He was completely different from the other instructors. After placing the chess set on the chessboard, they placed a jar of black and white stones beside them. The surrounding Ren sect disciples immediately gathered around them. Even Zhou Huang was the same. He stared at the duo curiously. As an instructor, you should give in to your students. I can't allow others to say that I'm bullying the weak. Come, you go first. I'll give you a handicap of 3 stones. Zhao Qianxiu stretched out his palm and expressed his generosity right from the start. Since he wanted to teach Wang Chong a lesson and make him give up on the idea, naturally, he had to make the other party admit defeat. It should be enough to let him go first and give him a handicap of 3 stones. All right. Wang Chong smiled calmly and accepted Zhao Qianxiu's goodwill. He placed a stone on the chessboard first. Gongzi, you can do it. Zhao Jingdian broke out in cold sweat for Wang Chong. He hadn't followed Wang Chong for long, so he wasn't too familiar with Wang Chong's chess skills. Zhao Qianxiu, there's no need to get too serious when playing chess with a student. It's fine. Zhou Huang tried to resolve the situation. He had a good impression of Wang Chong. After all, they had been through life and death together. He was also afraid that Wang Chong would lose too badly. However, the development of the matter was completely different from what everyone had imagined. 10 steps later, the smile on Zhao Qianxiu's face vanished. After 20 steps, a deep frown appeared on Zhao Qianxiu's forehead. After 40 steps, Zhao Qianxiu's attention was completely drawn into the chessboard. At the 50th step, Zhao Qianxiu's complexion turned extremely awful. Even those who didn't understand the game of Go could tell that Zhao Qianxiu was in a bad situation, extremely bad at that. As for those who understood Go, their attention had long been drawn to the match between Wang Chong and Zhao Qianxiu. Zhuang Jingping and Qi Weisi were stunned. The duo knew of Zhao Qianxiu's background, and it was for this reason that they were astonished. This round doesn't count. Another round, this round started as normal. Don't give way. At the 80th step, Zhao Qianxiu finally gave up. All right. Wang Chong looked at Zhao Qianxiu, and with a slight smile, he agreed to it readily. This round, Zhao Qianxiu lost even faster. By the 70th move, the game had already collapsed. I'll go first this round. Zhao Qianqiu was still unable to accept his loss to Wang Chong. All right. Wang Chong nodded in agreement. This was already the third round. By the fourth round, no matter how thick-skinned Zhao Qianqiu was, he couldn't help but feel embarrassed. I'll give you a handicap of 3 stones this round. Taking a sip of tea, Wang Chong took the initiative to ask Zhao Qianqiu. With a darkened face, Zhao Qianqiu nodded his head heavily, but he didn't say a single word. In this round, Zhao Qianqiu played exceptionally slowly and cautiously, and the further he went, the slower he became. In the end, Zhao Qianqiu wasn't able to leave the deflecting blade manor. After the fourth round, Zhao Qianqiu sat by himself, staring at the board with a grim expression. Compared to when he first arrived, it was a world of difference. Wang Chong, can we play a round? Zhou Huang suddenly asked Wang Chong with an eager gaze. He was a master archer, and on the battlefield, all he had to do was to follow orders and fire arrows at any moment. But who wouldn't want to become a talented general? Zhou Huang could tell that Wang Chong was truly talented in the art of war. Zhou Huang could only explain it as a legacy from a general and minister clan. Of course. Wang Chong chuckled and agreed to it without any hesitation. Soon, another person appeared beside Zhao Qianqiu, and he stared at the board silently as well. Zhao Qianqiu and Zhou Huang weren't able to leave the deflecting blade manor, and this was something they didn't expect. That lad has returned to the barracks. At this moment, Wang Chong, Zhao Jingdian, Zhuang Jingping, Zhao Qianqiu, and Zhou Huang had no idea that in an extremely distant place, a group of people was standing on a mountain peak, silently looking in the direction of deflecting blade manor. The autumn wind blew, and from where they were standing, they could clearly see the deflecting blade manor, which was only the size of a fingernail. Even though they couldn't see it clearly, they could still make out the silhouettes in the distance. I knew that lad must have some ulterior motive for coming to the Kunwa training camp instead of Shunwei and Longwei camps. If I'm not wrong then, Abu Tong, do you believe that he's going to start recruiting soldiers in the training camp soon? On the northern peak of Azure Dragon Peak, Zheng Xian waved his paper fan and chuckled. I heard that Wang Chong and his Wang clan don't have a good impression of the Hu. Abu Tong, I think that you and your father will have to wash the horses of that lad in the future. Abu Tong's face darkened, and he remained silent. On the other hand, the Hu's subordinates behind him were infuriated. Zheng Xian, there's no need for you to provoke me. If I'm not mistaken, His Highness King Qi isn't faring too well either. The King of Song and the Wang clan are able to squeeze him dry in the royal court. Abu Tong said coldly. The calm expression on Zheng Xian's face froze in an instant. Abu Tong, there's no need for us to criticize one another. The Wang clan is simply too powerful at the moment, and all of this is due to that lad. If we don't do something about it, neither of us will have a good time. Zheng Xian waved his paper, and he soon regained his composure. What do you intend to do? Abu Tong asked grimly. Hee, it seems like we've reached an agreement. Zheng Xian's smile eased up. Then it'll be easier for us to discuss the rest. The Kunwa training camp is still considered the capital, so we can't do anything to that lad. However, there's no need for us to do so either. That lad from the Wang clan wouldn't do anything meaningless. As long as we know what he's up to, we can just do the opposite. Thinking of Deng Mingxin, Zheng Xian's heart ached. Initially, he didn't intend to stand up for Wang Chong. As for King Qi, he could just feign civility and deal with him. But while he was at home, trouble would descend from the heavens. Deng Mingxin's matter had put him in a very passive position, and even the gazes of those around him had changed. Since it was Wang Chong who provoked him, he couldn't be blamed for his actions. That lad is no simple character. He built a residence there, and it's located right next to the training camp. There's a high chance that he's trying to win over the hearts of the people here. Since we know what he's after, the rest is simple. All we have to do is to stop him. Zheng Xian sneered coldly. But the royal court has already banned the purchase of land. That lad's residence is probably unique in this region. It's impossible for us to obtain it. Abu Tong said grimly. Clearly, he had already tried it before. Hee, that's because you didn't find the right person. It's not that I'm biased against you who or look down on you. However, it's better for us Han to deal with this matter ourselves. I've already told King Qi that I've requested a plot of land from the Court of Judicial Review. It should be completed in another 7 to 8 days. Zheng Xian said. Abu Tong was taken aback. It was as if he was meeting Zheng Xian for the first time. Hehe, what are you looking at? That lad's residence has been under construction for several months now. I'm not blind. Did you think that I would only take action now? Zheng Xian said. If it's really as you say, then I've truly underestimated you. Abu Tong gazed deeply at Zheng Xian. This fellow gave him a feeling that he would be an extremely difficult opponent to deal with. But why don't I see your residence? Abu Tong asked doubtfully. He scanned the surroundings, but there was no sign of human activity in the surrounding mountains. Of course you can't see it. That's because I've specially requested for it. I have to leave the trees on the periphery intact. I'll only chop them down after the construction is complete. Zheng Xian said with an unfathomable expression. Those who are skilled in battle are not worthy of fame. If you want to deal with someone, you can't let them be prepared. Abu Tong, you fellows are too high profile. This is also the reason why you attract so much hatred. King Qi still holds you in high regard. Abu Tong harumphed coldly. Of course, he didn't believe Zheng Xian's words. Speak, what do you want me to do? Abu Tong went straight to the point. It's simple. I'll rope in the students of the Kunwa training camp to recruit talents for King Qi. On the other hand, you'll warn those students that whoever dares to follow Wang Chong, whoever dares to step into Wang Chong's residence will be an enemy of King Qi and the Hu. What you have to do is to teach those fellows a lesson. Even if we can't make a move on Wang Chong, can't we teach those juniors a lesson? As long as we beat them into submission, naturally, no one will join the Wang clan side. With King Qi backing us, I would like to see who dares to go against us. Abu Tong, I'll leave this matter to you, right? Zheng Xian asked. Abu Tong glared at him hatefully. Naturally, he knew what Zheng Xian was up to. However, Abu Tong didn't object to the idea. As you wish. After saying those words, Abu Tong turned around and left with his Hu subordinates. Looking at Abu Tong's departing back, a smile slowly crept onto Zheng Xian's lips. Who was more suitable than a Hu to be his subordinate? More importantly, who was more suitable than the son of Great General Abusi? There was still plenty of room for the Hu Great General to work with the Wang clan. Chapter 297. Translator, Mr. Voltaire Editor. Modlaws 123. The land was vast and boundless, with mountains rising and falling like the waves of the sea. This was a vast plateau. The sky was high and the clouds were deep. The terrain was far higher than any of the surrounding lands, any of the countries. From here, one could see the world. In the Tang dynasty, this place was known as the Uzan. Huashu, you see it. Over here, over those mountains, the Tang dynasty is in the distance. The wind howled. At this moment, at the highest point of the mountains, at the edge of the plateau, a middle-aged man dressed in black stood against the wind. His aura was majestic, like a mountain range. Using the goose feather fan in his hand, he pointed to the end of the horizon, exuding the aura of a ruler. The man had a scholarly demeanor, and his eyes were filled with wisdom. He looked like a person from the Central Plains. However, the slightly rough yellow skin under his sleeves revealed his identity. The people here couldn't be any more authentic than the people of the Uzan. Milord, you see it. Beside the middle-aged man was a valiant general. His feet were apart, and a long saber hung from his waist. He stood there like a spear stabbed into the ground, giving off the feeling of an immovable mountain. His body wasn't very tall, but the aura he exuded was as vast and boundless as the ocean. And that sharp aura he exuded seemed to be able to split apart a mountain in front of him with a single slash. But so what if you see it? That land isn't suitable for grazing horses or sheep. Your subordinate doesn't understand. Why is Milord always thinking about that place? Huashu Wuzong said indifferently. There wasn't the slightest change in his eyes. He knew what his superior wanted to say. But as a general, he had no interest in such things. Huashu, you're wrong. Hearing the words of his subordinate, Daluan Ruozan retracted his goose feather fan and chuckled. Although the Tang dynasty isn't suitable for grazing horses or sheep, it produces the most beautiful silk in the world. It has the most grain and the most cities in the world. The people of the highlands should rule over the people of the lowlands. Huoshu, don't you think so? My lord, please think about it. Your subordinate is a crude man who only knows how to fight. Huoshu Wuzong said lightly. His expression was firm as he stood there motionlessly. Even his eyelashes did not tremble. Moreover, the Tang people may not be as easy to deal with as you think. Huoshu Wuzong said indifferently. As General Uzun, Huoshu Wuzong never looked down on others, but he would never underestimate his opponents either. If Uzun wanted to expand, the Tang dynasty was the best direction. However, even to this day, the Uzun Empire had never succeeded. Not because he was benevolent, but because he was too stubborn. The Uzun Empire was divided by the royal family. Qi de Zuzan, who resided in the capital city of Luosa, had a supreme position. Under Qi de Zuzan's jurisdiction, there were 4 royal lineages, which were ruled by Qi de Zuzan's 4 younger brothers. They were the Elisa royal lineage, the Lesa royal lineage, the Yez royal lineage, and the Yarlung royal lineage. Huoshu Wuzong and Daluan Ruozan belonged to the Elisa royal lineage that ruled over the southeast. Here, they were bordered by the Tang dynasty's Jiannan, and they weren't too far away from Erai's Mengshi Zhao. In these 2 years, the Tang dynasty's southern protector general Zhangqiu Jianqiong and Mengshi Zhao's King Jelifeng were their main enemies. The 180,000 elites of the Tang dynasty's southern protectorate manor were like a nail hammered into their hearts, exerting immense pressure on them. Ha, Huoshu, have you heard? Your nemesis Zhangqiu Jianqiong is going to be transferred to the capital. He intends to become the Minister of War of the Tang dynasty. That's not an insignificant position. Daluan Ruozan suddenly chuckled. Is the news reliable? Huoshu Wuzong was taken aback for a moment before a hint of interest appeared on his face. It hasn't been confirmed yet. However, according to our informants, there's at least an 80% chance of it happening. Daluan Ruozan replied confidently. He, without Zhangqiu Jianqiong around, the Tang dynasty's Jiannan is a void. Huoshu Wuzong, this is a great opportunity for us. As he spoke, he turned to look at Great General Uzun beside him with an indiscernible smile. Huoshu Wuzong's lips twitched slightly, but he soon regained his composure. It's useless. Zhangqiu Jianqiong's military might is a mix of truth and falsehood, and the news that you received might not be true. Perhaps he was the one who intentionally leaked the news. Besides, even if he were to leave, he would surely have made preparations beforehand. He and I have been rivals for a long time. He won't be an easy opponent to deal with. Zhangqiu Jianqiong isn't an easy opponent. However, the same can't be said for his successor, Xinyu Zhongte. If Zhangqiu Jianqiong is transferred to the Tang dynasty's capital, Huoshu, you'll have to prepare yourself. We'll be waging war against the Tang dynasty soon. Daluan Ruozan complimented with deep meaning in his eyes. I'm not afraid of war, but Lord, there's no turning back. Are we really prepared for it? Huoshu Wuzong gripped the hilt of his saber tightly as he replied. The Tang people were no pushovers. This had been proven countless times in the past. In the past 1,000 years, the Tang dynasty was the only territory that Uzun had yet to conquer. Similarly, the Uzun Empire was also a territory that the Tang dynasty had yet to conquer. Every single war, once started, was difficult to end. As one of Uzun's generals, Huoshu Wuzong knew this all too well. As a warrior, Huoshu Wuzong lived for war. War was his calling. But as one of Uzun's generals, Huoshu Wuzong had to consider the empire behind him. It's different this time. Daluan Ruozan chuckled as he fanned himself. There was an indescribable glint in his eyes. This time, it's the will of the gods. The Magisprius have asked 3 times, and all 3 times, the same prophecy was given. The crisis comes from the east. This is a crisis that concerns the survival of our Uzun Empire. If we can't nip this crisis in the bud, then our Uzun Empire will be beyond redemption. Huoshu, you should know when was the last time the same prophecy was given 3 times, right? Daluan Ruozan nodded with a serious expression. On this lonely plateau, there wasn't just one civilization or one dynasty. Thousands of years ago, there was another powerful dynasty on this plateau. However, this powerful dynasty suddenly perished overnight, and all traces of it were erased. Now, people only knew its name, Zhangsheng Dynasty. That was the Duzong Dynasty, which was even older than the 7 Crimson Sky Kings. Almost no one knew about this ancient Uzun Empire. Only the higher-ups of Uzun Empire knew about it. That was the last time the same prophecy was given 3 times. All these years, the prophecy had successfully prophesied the rise of Mount Goddess, the appearance of the Great Snow Mountain Temple, and the era of the 7 Crimson Sky Kings. In the Uzun Empire, the prophecy was a higher existence than the Great Snow Mountain Temple. Even the holy monks of the Great Snow Mountain Temple didn't dare to disobey it. Hehe, but I want to tell you that although the Magisprius say there are 3 prophecies, there are actually 4. The last one was hidden by Zhangpu. Daluan Ruozan said. Huoshu Wuzong's expression suddenly changed. Hehe, what does 4 identical prophecies mean? I don't think I need to explain it to you anymore. In the history of our Uzun Empire, this has never happened before. There is only one Tang dynasty in the east of our Uzun Empire. Without a doubt, the crisis comes from the Tang dynasty. Only the Tang dynasty has the strength to topple our Uzun Empire. Right now, Dusong Mengpoj has already brought the first prince to the capital of the Tang dynasty to investigate the situation. I heard that the monarch of the Tang dynasty has suddenly become muddle-headed. I don't know if this is true or not, but I believe that Dusong Mengpoj and the others will soon return with news. Daluan Ruozan said, his gaze turning to the northeast, piercing through the void to look in the direction of the capital of the Tang dynasty. Standing behind him, Huoshu Wuzong also looked in the same direction. The mountain was quiet, with only the sound of the wind blowing in the distance. It was the sound of countless Uzun warriors training. Rumble. Dust flew in the air. In the northwest of the capital of the Tang dynasty, 10 some elite horsemen galloped along the wide road. It was only 10 some horsemen, but they exuded the aura of an army of thousands. Even the earth seemed to tremble beneath their feet. Haha, this is the Tang dynasty. It's filled with farmers, cloth sellers, and silk sellers. How can such people compare to our Uzun? What right do they have to compete with our Uzun? In front of this group of elite soldiers, an Uzun youth with sword-like eyebrows sat on the back of a horse and heartily laughed in Tibetan. First Prince, this is a good thing. A brawny Uzun man exuding a majestic aura like a storm chased up from the rear. His face was yellow, as if he had been exposed to the sun. Although he wasn't very tall, his aura was as unshakable as a mountain. And what was most striking was his palm. It was especially wide and seemed especially powerful. This person was one of the great generals of the Uzun, Dusong Mengpoj. Dusong was the name of the clan. Mengpoj meant eagle. Only the most outstanding disciples of the plateau would be bestowed the name of Mengpoj by the clan. Every great clan of the Uzun would have one, and only one, Mengpoj. The current Tang dynasty is no longer the Tang dynasty of the past. Right now they like profit, business, and comfort. This is a good thing. A mountain cannot hold 2 tigers. On this continent, there shouldn't be 2 equally powerful empires. The weakening of the Tang dynasty is a good thing for us. Dusong Mengpoj said. He wore a leather hat on his head and wore ordinary clothes to hide his identity. Although this wasn't a particularly brilliant method, the Tang dynasty lacked understanding of the Uzun. Even if they knew of Dusong Mengpoj's name, they might not have seen him in person. But first Prince, don't forget the mission we shoulder. Thus, on this trip to the Tang dynasty, we should do our best to keep a low profile. As Dusong Mengpoj spoke, he stroked his beard. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.